Orphan boy masters Parry's skill and now has the most powerful magic. If you dig my recaps, don't forget to subscribe and smash that notification bell. On a cloudy night, a man named Noor unblocked the neighborhood's water supply with a shovel. The next morning, after the hard work, Aunt Stella gave him his well-deserved payment. Another day, during intense construction work, Noor was the most determined of all the workers, carrying dozens of sandbags at once. At the end of his shift, as he received his daily wage, he heard a girl crying for help in the distance. Without hesitation, he ran to the cave from where the sound came and found himself face to face with a hideous creature being fought by several soldiers. 15 years ago, to the northwest of the Kingdom of Clay's young Noor stacked firewood to feed the fire that warmed the humble farm where he lived. Despite his youth, circumstances had forced him to act like an adult from an early age, as his mother depended on him due to her illness. After giving her an herbal medication, he informed her that he needed to take the goats to the hill. His mother looked at him with a worried expression, but he promised not to go past the rock they had agreed upon. To reassure her, he promised to bring back a rabbit and some herbs for soup, though she didn't seem to improve despite all his efforts. Seeing his mother cough, Noor ran to fetch water, but she pulled him back, wiped a smudge from his face, and lamented from the depths of her heart that she couldn't be there for him in life's moment. Her wish was that he could live the life he wanted. Keeping his promise, Noor prepared the soup and informed his mother that it was ready. However, when he brought her a bowl, he realized the worst had happened. At dawn, the boy buried his mother in the backyard next to another grave he had made with some stacked stones and flowers. Tears streamed down his face as he lost someone so important, but the determination of this child was beyond imaginable. After wiping his face, Noor continued with his life as it had always been. Working in the field and his usual hunting provided his food and kept him sane in the terrible conditions he faced, but he managed to cope through dedication and hard work. Contrary to what one might expect from a boy his age, he even found time for studies amidst all the physical labor he was required to do every single day. During dinner, he looked at the other side of the table and saw no one there. To keep from getting discouraged, he focused on his bowl of food. One night after a fall, while reaching for a specific book he wanted, Noor began to flip through its pages and a memory instantly came to his mind. A few years ago, his father had told him a bedtime story about an adventurer who defeated a giant dragon with the help of his friends, learned magic from an ancient sorcerer, broke the curse of a forest, and was rewarded with an elixir that cures everything from the king of death. According to his father, no matter the difficulty level, an adventurer would always raise his sword against evil and injustice. Hearing this story made young Noor's eyes sparkle. Now, with the adventurer's tale in his hands, he recalled his mother's words about living the life he desired. At dawn, he placed fresh flowers on his parents' graves and announced that he was leaving the city for the first time in his life to become an adventurer. Without much ado, he bid farewell and set out on a journey that would change his life forever. A little further on, he saw two blocks made of a strange material in his path, but decided to pass through without thinking much of it. As he crossed the blocks, he unknowingly stepped through a magical line. When night fell, he camped somewhere in the forest and felt fear from the nocturnal sounds made by the animals, but he maintained his composure to prove to himself that he could handle it. After resting and continuing on his way, he saw the big city in the distance and was stunned by its magnitude. Gaining access to the inside of the walls, he wandered through the market, always wide-eyed and with a smile on his face. Following his path to his destination, he finally found the Adventurers Guild. However, the receptionist dampened the boy's enthusiasm by saying that it wasn't a place for children. Moreover, he reminded Noor that his parents would worry about him. Without hesitation, Noor said they were both dead. This statement caught the receptionist's attention, who then tried to help by saying that younger ones should go through the royal training school before coming to the guild. A few months later, eager to be one of them, the boys started practicing alongside other students. Some could conjure magic on their wooden swords, and Noor tried hard to do the same, but his teacher didn't seem very confident in the novice's abilities. After all, the only skill Noor had managed to learn so far was Parry, which involves defending against an attack in a way that allows a counterattack. For this reason, the tutor advised him to seek another path in life. Despite this, without losing enthusiasm, young Noor nodded knocked on the royal army's door and began intense training to become a knight. After more months of practice, the novice instructor delivered the sad news that Noor had developed well below expectations, and continuing this training could jeopardize his physical integrity. Being rejected again, he sought to become a hunter, but the teacher said he had no talent with a bow. Then he turned to professional thieves, but the local tutor noted that he wasn't capable of disarming traps or perceiving the presence of enemies around him. When he tried to become a mage, the master sorcerer made it clear that Noor could only manage to be a human lighter by conjuring a useless spark. Losing his determination, Noor's brightness dimmed as he was dismissed from the church for not being an effective healer. After a series of failures, he returned to the guild, surprising the receptionist by not being accepted into any existing school in the kingdom. Because of this, he received the worst news Noor could expect. Unfortunately, he wasn't fit to become an adventurer. Head hung low, he leaves the big city certain that he is no prodigy. Upon returning home, he visits his parents' graves, coming to terms with the fact that he lacks the talent for what he most desired in life. However, true to his personality, he promises himself that he will train even harder. Reigniting his spirit, he crafts a wooden sword and recalls his teacher's lessons. If you practice a movement repeatedly, you can master it. With this in mind, he trains the only skill he developed during those months away from home, the classic parry. Repeating the gesture non-stop, he spends days and nights honing his skill alone until a year passes and he can already evade 10 swords at once. 3 years later, Noor could deflect 100 swords simultaneously. Rain or shine there, he was practicing the same move. One night during training, he feels a strange aura emanating from his hand, which drives him to train even harder. 14 years on, Noor can deflect 1,000 wooden swords, yet he knows no other skills, and the maturity that comes with age makes this fact weigh more heavily on him. Regardless, one ordinary morning, he visits his parents' graves and announces that this is his last attempt to live his dream. Arriving at the Adventurers Guild, the new receptionist looks over his record and learned skills, recommending the beginner's school once again. This time, Noor wants to skip it, but the girl can't register him with such a meager resume. Suddenly, the old guild master reappears, and Noor greets the man, though he doesn't remember who this young man is. After a sharper look, the master realizes it's Noor in the flesh, and the two sit down for a drink and chat about life. Noor explains he spent all this time training alone, but could only develop the parry. In response, the master explains there's a rank below E, which is rank F, where Noor can attempt to get a spot, but with conditions. Adventurers of this class can't take missions involving killing or venture outside the city to collect items. In essence, only simple nearby tasks for low-pay jobs that local beggars usually did to secure their daily meal. Despite this, without hesitation, Noor accepts the challenge, surprising the guild master. Thus began the days of the new rank F adventurer, filled with hard work wherever he went. The tasks he undertook were done with the determination he always showed in life's chores. Whether carrying junk or rescuing a cat, there was Noor fulfilling his objective while continuing to train intensely to advance in life. To his joy, this work time brought him some new skills, albeit not very strong ones like feather step or rock throw. Rank F or not, Noor had his adventurer's license in hand, and that meant he was living his dream, even if just nibbling at the edges. In his mind, it was more than he could ask for. Returning to the day, he encountered the monstrous bull, a creature he never thought he'd see outside the books he read before bed. The soldier's commander was giving orders to flank the powerful opponent. Their goal was to protect the girl who was trapped, and the officer managed to accomplish this, even at the cost of his life. With a single blow, that minotaur-like beast had crushed the man by hurling him into the wall. Noor tries to help the commander, but his life had already slipped away. Leaderless, facing the monster, the soldiers attack recklessly, and they are mercilessly slaughtered one by one. As a result, the path to the girl is left open for the beast. Noor tries to protect her with rock throw. The stone thrown at the minotaur's eye enrages it, and it turns on the human to exact revenge. Running from the opponent as best he can, Noor knows he must use the only skill that can make any difference in this battle. Waiting for the right moment, he anticipates the bull's horn attack and uses parry to deflect the blow. Successfully, he sends the enemy crashing into the wall, but it returns with even more fury. Noor continues using the same technique while his sword gradually breaks under the strain. Though he finds openings for a counterattack, he has no offensive skills, keeping him on the defensive. Worse still, the minotaur resumes its attack on the girl, so Noor uses his feather step and strikes as best he can with his sword, which breaks completely in the move. Even if he never becomes a great adventurer, the boy at least wants to protect this defenseless girl before him. After all, as his father said, an adventurer is one who raises his sword against evil. Noor's strike has no significant effect, and he is attacked again. Even with his broken sword, he continues to defend with parry. To his surprise, one of his defenses sends the beast's axe flying back and beheads it. After being saved, the girl asks for the adventurer's name, but as he is no one important, Noor leaves without answering. More soldiers arrive to rescue Lady Lindbergh. Following this victory, walking through the city, Noor realizes that a creature not even a demon can pose such immense danger. Therefore, he decides he needs to train even more. The day after the bloody battle, soldiers gathered the bodies of those who lost their lives in the name of Lady Lindbergh, who paid her respects with a prayer. At that moment, Inez, the girl's bodyguard, arrived with concern and apologized. However, the noblewoman emphasized that it made no sense to ask for an escort on a test mission for the heir to the throne. Moreover, she herself had insisted on having no bodyguards. Following this, Lord Darkin requested that the noblewoman return to the castle immediately because Lord Rain wished to speak with her. At the castle, after speaking with Lindbergh, the lord deduced that a minotaur, a demon from the depths of the abyss, had indeed been in the city. In this case, both Rain and Darkin agreed that someone was behind this, and Darkin had discovered that the source of the power that brought the monster was a ring found on the corpse of a merchant on the battlefield. Oaken the mage conducted research and found that the magical stone in this accessory was of unparalleled purity, the kind you would never find on the market. Given this, Rain noted that minotaurs are a-level threats, and that not even the wealthy should have the power to purchase something that imprisons such a creature. According to Oaken, this ring came from the magical empire of Doritas, which was not surprising considering that this kingdom had a habit of provoking the kingdom of clay. By capturing the princess and summoning an a-level monster simultaneously, Lord Rain knew he needed to be cautious about the enemy's next moves. Curiously, Doritas had not even tried to erase traces of their involvement, raising a question. Regardless, it was clear that they wanted the kingdom of clay to start a war, as they were eyeing the replicas of the dungeon of the lost that resided there. As for the man who saved Lindbergh, documents stated that he defeated the Minotaur with a single sword in a matter of seconds. The espionage corps followed this individual, but lost sight of him. It was reported that the man vanished before everyone's eyes as if he were an illusion. With that, the lords wondered who this individual was. Back at the Adventurers Guild, Noor surprised the guild master by returning alive as news of a demon emerging in the dungeon had spread throughout the village. Since the creature had appeared near the construction site next to the dungeon and Noor had not shown up afterward, the master had been worried. Noor explained that he had been pursued by some strange people the night before, so he went straight home and stayed there. The master asked why Noor's face was so dirty, to which he replied that he had spent the morning cleaning mud from the drain before coming. In any case, the master commented that it was fortunate the adventurer had not died, as he certainly could not have handled an a-level monster. Noor felt lucky not to have encountered the creature, as he had only defeated a cow the previous night and had no major problems. According to the master, the dungeon monster had been killed by a mysterious individual in a matter of seconds, making Noor realize there were many strong people around. The master paid the adventurer for his work the previous day until a hooded girl approached from behind and startled him. Revealing her face, Lady Lindbergh apologized for the intrusion, but said she needed to find the adventurer using her long-distance detection ability. Surprised, Noor asked if she was from the thief class, but she focused on the mage class with knowledge of all 6 skill systems, though it was so basic that she was embarrassed to discuss it with someone like him. Noor didn't understand why someone would see him that way, and since everyone was looking at the princess, she invited the young man to talk outside the guild. Before leaving, the master pulled the boy aside and asked what he had done, but Noor didn't think he had done anything wrong. Continuing the conversation, Lindbergh invoked her soundproof barrier to prevent eavesdroppers. Around the city, 2 soldiers were searching for the mysterious man who had defeated the Minotaur, but didn't believe they could do better than the espionage corps. Noor mentioned that those guys were looking for someone, but Lindbergh replied that he didn't need to worry because the 2 of them couldn't be seen. After reaching a more secluded spot, the princess formally thanked the adventurer for his help, as he had saved her life. Not only that, but he had also saved countless people who would have been victims of the monster outside the dungeon. Noor thought this was an exaggeration, as in his mind, he had only made a small intervention in the fight, but the princess insisted that the adventurer had been decisive. So decisive that she wished to reward him appropriately quickly, especially since her father had asked her to find her savior. Despite all her insistence, Noor kept saying he didn't need anything from the girl, even though she emphasized that she was a person of status and could provide incredible things for him, like land, for example. Once again, Noor wanted nothing in return, leaving Lindbergh speechless. Determined to give something back, the princess cried and declared she would not leave his side until she gave him what he deserved. This phrase reminded Noor of his childhood, when he would knock on the cleric's door and declare he wouldn't leave until he was trained. With that, he agreed to meet the girl's father since she insisted so much, but warned he didn't want anything extravagant. Happy Lindbergh used her abilities to conceal them both and begin the journey. Arriving at the clay mansion, Noor couldn't believe that such a large structure was the girl's home, as he had never seen anything like it before. By the way, the girl asked the adventurer's name and then introduced herself as Lady Lindbergh Clays, but since it was a long name, she preferred to be called Lynn. Ahead, Inez received her mistress, who asked where her father was. The knight informed her that he was in an audience with Lord Rain, and with a stern face asked who the man behind her was. Lynn explained that he was the adventurer who risked his life to save her the previous night, while Noor wondered if this woman was some sort of servant, but couldn't imagine her doing laundry in all that armor. Besides, the woman was clearly keeping an eye on him. On the way, Inez was escorting the princess to her father when another knight appeared in front of them, pointing his lance at Noor's face, who started to fear the craziness of the people in this house. Inez asked Gilbert to calm down because this man was a guest of Lady Lindbergh. Gilbert laughed sarcastically, assuming this was the guy everyone was talking about, even though he didn't see him as someone special. Inez told him to stop being rude and invited him to join the walk, saying the more escorts the better. Meanwhile, at the audience with Rain, the king expressed his indignation with Doritas, a kingdom that respected nothing, not even the non-aggression pact that had been established. According to Rain, the last meeting with the sovereign of that region had made everything clear. At that time, the king of Doritas demanded all rights to explore the dungeon in exchange for the loan of military power. When the proposal was refused, the monarch promised that the kingdom of Clay would pay. Then Lynn arrived, greeting her brother and father, but as soon as Rain noticed that she was wearing the hermit's cloak, he scolded her for leaving the castle again. Lynn argued that she had gone in search of the man who saved her life, so the king assumed it was the only unknown individual in the throne room. Noor apologized for coming dressed like that and for not knowing how to behave properly, but the monarch really didn't care about the adventurer's clothes. On the contrary, he showed all his gratitude and stated that it was easier to talk to those who were unaware of aristocratic etiquette rules. Besides, if it weren't for the commoner, the princess wouldn't be there at that moment. Shaking the king's hand, Noor accepted the thanks, thinking he could go home now to take a bath. But the king made it clear that letting the young man leave without an appropriate reward would be impossible. Whether it was money or territory, the adventurer just had to ask. However, Noor replied that he didn't want any of that, and surprised by the commoner's reaction, the king mentioned that he had access to the treasures of the oldest dungeon in the world, where all kinds of rarities could be found and stored in the treasure room. According to the sovereign, Noor could take home half of the stored items. Rain commented that this was madness, but Noor repeated that he wasn't interested in what was offered because a simple thank you was good enough. Thus, the monarch tried one last time by pulling out a sword from behind the throne, one the size of himself, making his son complain again. However, the king understood that this weapon had become a mere decorative object, so the commoner would make better use of it. Besides, no one would notice if he replaced it with the replica he had ordered. Holding the sword, Noor felt its weight and imagined it to be something of unimaginable value, so he believed he couldn't take it home, but the king downplayed the situation, saying it was just an item he had found on a journey. With that, the adventurer accepted the gift, fortified his physique, and wielded the sword with impressive ferocity. Even more impressive was the fact that he could hold it with just one hand, a detail the monarch made sure to mention with joy and admiration. Speaking of which, regarding his daughter, the king personally asked Noor to teach Lynn to be stronger because the outside world was becoming increasingly dangerous, and he needed someone trustworthy enough to turn her into a true warrior. Noor argued that he had nothing to teach the girl and that she should choose her tutor herself. The king laughed heartily and agreed with the commoner's view, then dismissed him from the meeting. On his way out of the mansion, Noor couldn't help but think he was taking home an object of inestimable value, even though the king had insisted it was just a piece of charcoal. In any case, the boy realized that this weapon had the exact width of Aunt Stella's drain, so it would be the perfect shovel for for a sensational cleaning. At that moment, Inez approached the adventurer and asked for a moment of his time. First of all, she apologized for her suspicious attitude towards the one who saved her mistress. Embarrassed by so much formality, Noor asked the woman to stand up, then she emphasized that her duty was to protect the Clay family at all costs, so she wanted the guest to understand the more discerning way in which outsiders were received at the mansion. With that said, she introduced her full name: Inez Harness, Vice Captain of the Clay family's Choir of Knights. Long ago, she was known as the Divine Shield, given her efficiency as the princess's bodyguard, Lady Lindbergh. To her, saving Lynn was the same as saving her own life. Impressed by the woman's titles, Noor didn't think he had done anything special, but the knight assured him that she would do everything in her power to help the adventurer in any way she could. Seeing that the people of this house didn't accept no as an answer, Noor saw no other option but to accept this aid. On the other hand, Inez emphasized that the way the guest had addressed the king was unacceptable. Therefore, if he returned to the throne room, he needed to understand that the conduct norms had to be respected. Seeing the boy sweating nervously, she asked for his name last and was shocked to learn it was Noor. Without revealing the reason, the vice captain said her goodbyes until Gilbert appeared next, pointing his lance at the guest's face once more. The lancer invited Noor to test his skills, so the poor visitor realized he would never be able to go home again. Arriving in a training room, Gilbert announces that he has brought an adventurer for a simulated battle, worrying Noor as he hasn't had a training partner for a long time and doesn't know how to act. Calling Noor Mr. Hero, the lancer asks the young man to choose any weapon he likes. So with a wooden sword, the visitor gets ready to start the match. Without ceremony, Gilbert launches his first attack with a staff that has no sharp tip, which is easily deflected by his opponent. The way Gilbert controlled his steps along with his polished movements impressed Noor. Nonetheless, being honest with himself, he couldn't understand how this warrior could be so slow. Humble, Noor considers that the royal knight might be going easy to avoid embarrassing the guest, so he asks for a moment to tell his opponent not to hold back so much. Upon hearing this, the lancer promises to raise the level of the duel. Gripping his lance more tightly, he charges at Noor and keeps his promise, landing numerous blows with increased speed and precision. Yet he still fails to hit his adversary. This time, drops of sweat can be seen on Noor's face. However, he notices that Gilbert leaves himself open when attacking, as if provoking a counterattack. The member of the royal guard begins to get irritated by the fact that he keeps missing his target, but Noor continues to think that this is some kind of trap to catch him off guard. As time passes and the situation remains the same, Gilbert loses more and more patience and increases his speed, while Noor keeps asking for the level to be raised. Seeing the embarrassed reaction of his opponent, Noor realized that perhaps this really is the best the guy can do. Therefore, he considers that all this solitary training he did might have had a greater effect than he ever imagined. Irritated, Gilbert uses his first ability, Dragon's Tomb, to avoid the risk of leaving without having touched his rival. But when the smoke clears, Noor had evaded the attack without any risk. Awkward about this, the visitor surrenders and leaves, reflecting on what just happened. Meanwhile, in the training room, those present wondered how that guy was able to escape the Dragon's Tomb. The soldiers made excuses, blaming the blunt-tipped lance that Captain Gilbert used, which hindered the ability's efficiency, but the officer himself knew exactly what had happened. From the first time he held a lance, Gilbert discovered he had a talent for it. In no time practicing, the young man was known throughout the royal capital as someone unbeatable, and as he trained and polished his techniques, Gilbert grew stronger. Until one day, an elder from the village who followed the underground duels asked what the lancer thought of today's fight, and he confessed it was tedious. After all, no opponent had been able to face him for some time, and no matter how much he searched, the boy couldn't find a worthy opponent. According to rumors, the elder said that neighboring countries were moving to the capital in search of wealth and glory, and that perhaps it was time for Gilbert to take a step forward in his career, returning there to join the men who had that dream. Without hesitation, Gilbert returned to the royal capital and practiced his technique by hunting demons. Hearing that formidable warriors had joined the army, Gilbert challenged them all and defeated them one by one. However, none of this was enough. In the end, he still hadn't found a worthy challenger. Even in the face of the most terrible creatures in the region, every fiber of the lancer's body was moved only by the endless tedium of not seeing any being in front of him that could take his title of unbeatable. Over time, this feeling turned into anger and disdain for the weak who crossed his path. As time went on, one day, his instructor approached him and commented that people had nicknamed him Sovereign Lance. According to Gilbert, it was just a silly nickname without disrespecting the teacher, who was called Sovereign Sword. Seeing his pupils' distress, the swordsman suggested he face Ani's harness, but Gilbert thought she wouldn't be a challenge. In fact, he would love to duel someone like the instructor himself, who must also be tired of training these soldiers who have the same strength he had when he was a clumsy kid. Anyway, the teacher emphasized that his main mission is to protect the kingdom and prepare the men for it, because a war cannot be won alone, no matter how strong someone is. Besides, surely one day someone will appear who will surpass him. Gilbert imagines it's possible, and he hopes that person is more willing to duel against lower-ranked colleagues to rid him of his boredom. Returning to the present, Gilbert saw in Noor the chance to see with his own eyes what a man who defeated a minotaur can do and how he behaves. But at the end of the day, he noticed that the man acted strangely, insisting he didn't want titles of glory or lands for himself despite doing what he did for the king. Besides the discourteous way he treated the sovereign. Honestly, Gilbert didn't see in that man someone capable of killing a demon of that level, but nothing could erase from his mind what he experienced in the duel against him. Reality will continue knocking at the door of his mind, come what may, and this truth screams at every moment that Gilbert never touched his opponent during the fight. Near the end, when the Lancer saw in the dragon's tomb his chance not to leave there humiliated, the adversary dodged the attack with the same ease. Thus, for the first time in his life, Gilbert felt defeated. To make matters worse, Noor gave up the fight to avoid embarrassing the captain in front of his subordinates, and Gilbert knows this feeling will hurt him until it's resolved. Speaking of which, as he raised his sword and withdrew, Noor confirmed that the two would meet again. As soon as the visitor left, the officer noticed the cracks in the ring left by the man. Returning home, Noor analyzed that if he hadn't used his physical enhancement followed by feather steps, he wouldn't have escaped that surreal attack. In fact, he believes he would be dead if the opponent hadn't held back the strength of that blow. In Noor's mind, Gilbert was teaching him that pride leads to death, whatever the name of that night was, because up to that moment, Noor still couldn't remember his name. Maybe it was Piu Belt or something like that. Whatever his name, the Lancer showed the boy that he needed to train more and get even stronger. As promised, the next day, the adventurer used his royal gift to clean the cesspool, as it fit like a glove. In fact, he left the cesspool very clean, which for him was as great a merit as success after a long and arduous adventure. This efficiency made the boy famous in the neighborhood, so the residents increased their demand for him to perform this service. However, even though he was happy that his cesspool cleaning job was going well, it seemed that he needed to stay away from his other job for a while. After all, they were transporting soil in front of the dungeon where that minotaur originated, so it was wise to be cautious, even though he was only rank F and could take on few jobs. Now that he had more time, the adventurer believed that this sword would be his partner in being useful to the people in some way. For example, he could use the weapon to row or to put the pizza in the oven. Who knows, he might even use it to grill a barbecue for the crowd. Noor would be a celebrity. The problem was that his fire technique was falling behind, considering that his fingers still seemed like a human lighter. Even though he had practiced at several schools, all he could manage was to conjure low-level spells. In the midst of these thoughts, Lin suddenly arrived and approached the adventurer. Remembering when Anise had scolded him for treating the king like a buddy, he addressed the princess in the most formal manner possible, even though he looked like a Neanderthal in a suit. Lin immediately cut him off and asked to be called by her nickname, then informed him that Anise had told her where he was, so she had come after him. With this, the boy realized that this knight had a knack for finding out where others were, even though he had never told her where he was going. Then Lin asked to be the adventurer's squire, but he had no idea what that meant. She explained that it was someone who took care of another person's daily tasks, while learning the techniques and knowledge from this master like an apprentice or assistant. Without a second thought, Noor refused the proposal, thinking he had nothing to teach the girl, and that he didn't need her help for anything as he knew how to do everything himself. Lin argued that her family would pay him a generous instructor's salary, but he didn't care about that. Not giving up, the princess said she would do anything for the boy, but he was serious when he said he saw no use for the girl. With that, she almost cried while promising she was willing to to do anything to prove she could be useful. Trying to make her point, she drew her wand and conjured a spell of ice lances. As soon as the lances fell, she summoned flames that melted the ice, leaving the simple cesspool cleaner frightened. According to her, this was her most promising ability, the Hellfire. Beside her, Lin also considered the Mist Blade quite powerful, as it cut an immense tree in half without the boy even noticing. According to her, her thief class instructor Karu was considered the Shadow Sovereign and had taught her this knowledge, but it didn't end there. Besides everything she had shown, Lin drew a luminous sword and performed the Divine Cut, which this time tore another tree vertically, something even more impressive. Proudly, the princess explained that this was the most brutal technique of a swordsman. Despite all this, Noor kept saying no to the little girl. Curiously, he felt like garbage next to all the things the child had shown and didn't understand how she could see him as some kind of tutor. To show that he wasn't capable of much, he lit his finger lighter and said it was the only magic he knew how to conjure. Returning home, frustrated, Lin reflected on how this kind of talentless warrior was just the type of legend the teachers told to encourage students. However, meeting Noor, she discovered this happens in real life. Remembering when Oken taught her the small flame technique, the mage increased the fire and explained that even the weakest spells could become stronger if you practiced them. Curiously, Lin began to practice this technique incessantly, but never managed to increase the flame. As ridiculous as it seemed, this magic required a lot of effort to develop, which is why she was impressed when Noor reproduced this spell, as the fire was bigger than Oken's, the greatest of the mages. At that moment, Noor explained that this level was the same for the other 5 skill classes, which for him meant he was terrible. But Lin knew it was extraordinary. As extraordinary as the fact that Noor had fought a minotaur with a simple sword and never bragged about his strength to others. On the contrary, he helped the community humbly. For this reason, Lin saw in Noor a strong man, both physically and mentally, strong enough to live alone on his own terms. One day, the princess would rule the kingdom alongside her brother and carry the clay royal family motto, "Those with royal blood must be strong," and that was exactly what the girl aimed to achieve by being taught by Noor. With this in mind, she returned to the adventurer and declared that she would follow him wherever he went until he saw that she had traded her immaturity for usefulness. The next day, reflecting in his office, Lord Rain couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy towards Noor. After all, his father had given the black blade to that stranger who had just set foot in the castle for the first time. That was a rare sword found by the king in the deepest corner of the Dungeon of Doom alongside the 6 sovereigns. Made from an unknown material stronger than mithril orichalcum and mana metal, no technique used had ever managed to scratch that relic, hence it became known as the unbreakable blade. The big question that remained was how such a hard material became so distorted. Still, despite its appearance, this artifact was worth more than gold and shouldn't be so easily discarded into the hands of a farmer. Yet thinking it over, Rain recalled that his father predicted tough times ahead and somehow saw in that man some kind of hope for facing the future conflict. It's not something conjured from his imagination. After all, the guy had killed a minotaur and saved Princess Lin's life. With that in mind, it's possible Noor is some kind of secret weapon for the dark days that will engulf the clay kingdom. Speaking of Noor, he's at the market with Lin, asking if it's okay for her to be seen on the street, to which she confidently replies yes, because above all, she's an adventurer. Feeling more at ease, Noor mentions he plans to stop by the guild after lunch, and Lin thinks it's a great idea from her instructor. Being called an instructor makes the young man thoughtful, as not even in his wildest dreams did he imagine he'd ever be considered someone's teacher. However, the more he tries to convince the girl otherwise, the more obsessed she becomes, to the point of following him around like a keychain. For this reason, Noor's idea is to go to the guild, pick up a menial low-rank F job, and show the noble that he's just a simple man. After eating and arriving at the guild, the first question Noor hears is what on earth he's doing with Lady Lindbergh. Offended, the girl insists she's an adventurer named Lin, so there's no need to add titles to that. Embarrassed, the guild master nods, but still wants to know from the young man what's going on. Not even Noor Noor can explain, so the old man apologizes for meddling where he wasn't invited. Changing the subject, Noor asks for a job for 2 people expecting to weed a field or lay concrete under the sun. However, the guild master knows the princess is a B rank, so they can take on the task of hunting goblins around the capital. Shocked, Noor knows well that these monsters are tough, but the prospect of facing them gives the adventurer motivation, and he starts to show excitement. At the same time, he worries it might look like he's exploiting the girl's rank, especially since all he wanted until just a moment ago was to send her back home as quickly as possible. Seeing her mentor lost in thought, Lin asks if everything's alright, so he musters the courage to ask if she'd lower her rank a bit to join this mission. To his surprise, she's even more excited than he is about the job, especially if it means pleasing her teacher. Despite the relief, Noor also feels bad for depending on a girl her age to get this kind of mission. Nonetheless, it doesn't mean he'll give up on his dream because of it, so he grabs his sword and heads out for the adventure, even though the guild master hadn't even mentioned the goblin's location. Seconds later, he realizes the mistake he made. Stamping the contract, the master asks the duo not to go too hard, as even low-level monsters can pose great dangers. Pointing towards the beast forest, the old man indicates the mission's location and mentions that the right ear of the goblin will serve as proof of its completion. Rumors suggest these monsters have been dwindling in number lately, so if they don't find any, the adventurers should bring back medicinal herbs or something similar to compensate. Soon they reach the capital's gate, and the guard orders the gates to be opened. Lin smiles as she feels her freedom in her hands, and Noor expresses his enthusiasm for the first job outside the city gates. On the way, the first thing the young man notices is that these trees are much denser than those in the south, something he had never seen before. Coming from nobility, Lin had the chance to travel the world, so she knows that each region's ecology varies. Seeing that the girl is knowledgeable about these matters, Noor wants to know what kind of monsters goblins are. She explains that they hunt small animals and eat fruits, but are also known for their aggression towards humans out of survival instinct. If goblins are left unchecked, they will start reproducing to the point of causing food shortages in the forest, and their high numbers indicate danger for the villages near the beast forest. That's why from time to time adventurers are sent to control their population growth. Moreover, it's said that a forest's ecological abundance depends on the existence of goblins, so they cannot be wiped out. For example, this forest has a variety of rare plants, not found elsewhere, which is why novice adventurers are sent here to earn their first income. Impressed, Noor realizes that this young woman is not only skilled with a sword, but also with her mind, which intimidates the one who should be the tutor in their relationship. As they delve deeper into the forest, signs of goblins had yet to be found at this point, which isn't normal. Apparently, the rumors about the goblins' population reduction are true. At least Lin feels the presence of a monster, though it's a bit distant, and that's enough for them to start the search in earnest. As Noor ventured deeper into the forest, she noticed that the woods took on an increasingly eerie appearance. Lin pointed out that this part of the forest was filled with old trees that cast dark shadows, blocking out most of the sunlight. Despite the ominous atmosphere, this area was a favorite haunt of goblins, so their hopes of encountering one grew. However, upon reaching the spot where they expected to find the monster, Lin saw nothing. But after looking around, they spotted a goblin being half devoured by an invisible creature. In that moment, Lin cast her revelation spell, revealing an emperor goblin, a subspecies of the goblin king. Brimming with brute strength, the monster grabbed 2 tree trunks and roared with such force that it kicked up dust. Noor glanced at the princess and saw she was terrified. Despite her privileged abilities, she had no combat experience. To calm his pupil, he caught her attention and assured her that they would face this adversary together. Noor fully understood that this monster was worth 10 normal goblins, but he didn't want to dwell on that or frighten the young woman, so they prepared for whatever might come. Analyzing their opponent, the princess noted that the emperor goblin was created by humans through genetic manipulation, a method that had been banned due to the dangers it posed. For example, this goblin could feed on its own kind to grow stronger. During this analysis, the monster attacked Noor with a tree trunk, which which he deflected using his parry skill, the adventurer's specialty. If attacking wasn't his strong suit, his defense was certainly formidable. By deflecting one of the blows, Noor managed to destabilize the goblin, giving Lin the chance to cast Wind Cutter. However, the enemy dodged, so she followed up with Ice Dance to cover a larger area and make evasion harder. But the creature used a trunk as a shield. After recovering, the goblin went back on the offensive, hurling the trunk at the princess, who was protected by her tutor. The goblin repeated the same strategy, while Noor comfortably responded with parry, keeping himself unharmed. When the monster paused briefly, Lin noticed a monostone on its forehead and guessed it was the source of its power. But the enemy tested Noor's defense again, this time throwing multiple trunks at once, a number he knew he couldn't deflect. Therefore, Lady Lindbergh intervened with her wind blast, repelling the trunks and striking a significant part of the forest. Despite being cut multiple times in the process, the Emperor Goblin quickly regenerated, leaving Lin without ideas. At that moment, Noor took charge and asked the girl to aim the wind blast at his back. Nervous, she asked if she had heard correctly, as that spell could devastate a fortress wall. But the man was confident in his strategy, planning to use his sword to shield himself from the impact. In his mind, this was the only way to approach their opponent. With that, Lindbergh cast the spell at her master's back, who used physical enhancement to avoid losing his legs in the process. With feathered feet, he dodged the thrown trunks, and with light healing, he regenerated parts of his body suffering from Lin's spell. As he closed in on the beast, the adventurer leaped and struck the magic stone with his black blade, dislodging the relic. After that, the Emperor Goblin could no longer control itself, flailing in agony and throwing anything in sight. Confident in their victory, Noor asked Lin to finish the job, but to do so without causing unnecessary suffering if possible. Understanding the message, Lin cast Hellfire, incinerating the monster. Despite the victory, Noor felt guilty for having killed the goblin. He even planned to avoid future jobs involving hunting this species. Moreover, to prevent overconfidence and avoid unprepared danger, the warrior intended to retreat and train until he felt ready for greater challenges. Soon after, spies from the Clay Kingdom informed Lord Rain that the novice adventurer had defeated an Emperor Goblin. The young noble could scarcely imagine how powerful such a creature must be with that monostone. According to rumors, it was 10 times larger than a Goblin King. Since it wasn't normal to find such beings near the capital, Rain suspected the magic empire was involved. Regarding the monostone, one of the prince's agents discovered it might be the demon heart from the sacred theocracy of Mithra. Considering even Lin emerged practically unscathed from the battle, her brother was impressed with the quality she and Noor displayed, even after being ambushed by an enormous invisible beast. Speaking of which, Lady Lindbergh believed the goblin had been in the area for several days, according to the spies. Fearing there might be more similar monsters around, Lord Rain ordered intensified investigations in light of the new evidence. Returning to the Adventurers Guild, the master felt proud of the boy he had watched grow up, capable of defeating a goblin. Humble as always, Noor credited Lin, who tried to refuse the accolade. In truth, there was no single protagonist in the battle, and they both knew it as they exchanged a slight smile. It might not seem like much to other adventurers, but today Noor wanted to celebrate his first successful hunt. Meanwhile, the master commented that even goblins could be troublesome, as he had said, to which Noor agreed, especially with those mana stones on their foreheads. Hearing this, the old man asked if they were sure it was a goblin and requested the right ear as proof. From there, you can imagine the adventurers exchanged another look, but this time with the expression of someone who arrives at a festival only to realize they forgot their ticket at home. After all, in the heat of the moment, they had turned the creature into a charred mess. Meanwhile, Lord Rain receives a letter that he reads with apprehension. The manuscript contained the following words: "At night, a mysterious sound keeps me from sleeping. There are more stray cats and dogs now. Grandpa went for a walk and never returned. The nearby forest suddenly went quiet. For the past few days, the cattle have been afraid of something and causing trouble because of it." The letter included the location where each of these events took place. Rain notices a connection between the manuscript and the incident in the Forest of Beasts and assumes that the enemy is more present in the kingdom than previously thought. Consequently, he orders his spies to form a group to investigate the indicated areas and urgently summons the 6 sovereigns. After his subordinates depart, the prince is startled by how far the people of the Magic Empire will go to get what they want. With this unchecked ambition, they will certainly take many innocent lives in the process of stealing the resources they desire. Meanwhile, in a completely completely different mood, Noor and Lin are enjoying a barbecue, relieved that they were at least rewarded in some way since they literally set fire to the evidence of their completed job. Fortunately for the pair, the guild master is lenient to this extent. Aside from that, Noor is still worried about the princess hovering around him all the time and wonders when she will return home, as her royal family will soon be worried and searching for her. Speaking of which, she informs him that she will return home immediately, which lifts a weight off the adventurer's shoulders as he no longer needs to babysit the noblewoman for the day. However, at that moment, the princess's brother appears and summons Noor for a journey the next morning to a town in the kingdom's mountainous district where a guarded carriage will be the mode of transport. While Noor is left puzzled, the Lord regrets not being able to explain the details of the mission well, but assures the adventurer that he will be handsomely rewarded if he accepts the job. The next day, Noor had accepted the mission through the guild, and the master advised the young man to relax and set off on the journey, as the crown doesn't skimp on remuneration. But in truth, Noor didn't accept the offer for the money. Rather, he had never ridden in a carriage before and wanted to see what it was like. For someone who never had the opportunity to hit the road, this was the greatest reward for the young man, who watched the landscapes around him with a smile on his face as the breeze caressed his cheeks, indicating that his journey was about to begin. On the other hand, Lin didn't seem as excited as her partner. In fact, she felt guilty that her brother had burdened the adventurer with this mission, but Noor assured her that he felt like a kid in a candy store, plus he would be paid in the end. Before they departed, Rain informed that the novice would travel northwest of the capital until reaching the mountainous district of Tauros. There he would stay for a while, and if nothing abnormal happened, Noor was to cross the mountain leading to the neighboring land, the sacred theocracy of Mithra. The inexperienced traveler questioned if it would be a smooth crossing, and Rain believed it would be initially. The problem was that Lin was worried about it, fearing something might happen. Ini's harness reassured the girl to stay calm, as she was there precisely in case something did happen. The knight had received a secret order from the prince, because according to him, the royal capital would fall into an unprecedented crisis shortly. Therefore, he ordered the squire to take his sister to Mithra in secret, as Lady Lindbergh would not agree to stay there if she knew. Concerned, Inez believed it was dangerous for her to be away from the capital in case of an emergency, but Lord Rain emphasized that this mission was of absolute priority, as Inez was the only person Lin trusted completely. Later, during a travel break, the warrior apologized for Noor being involved in all this. With this additional behavior, the adventurer began to think that this trip was not as innocent as it seemed, especially considering how the two were acting throughout the journey. Inez tried to downplay the issue by saying that the responsibility of keeping the princess and the adventurer safe demanded great focus, and that Noor shouldn't worry about her. In fact, the man wasn't exactly worried, as he knew how to escape a fight if necessary, but the warrior made it clear that she had a shield and everything was under control. At no point had Noor seen the woman wielding such an armament, so he commented on it with her. To his confusion, she replied that it was even better that she didn't carry anything. Then she explained what she meant in practice by conjuring her divine shield through magic. As Noor touched the shield like a moth drawn to a flame, she asked him to protect himself behind this barrier if anything happened, as almost no magic or weapon could penetrate it. In the meantime, Noor remembered when Inez mentioned that the officer who trained with him at the castle Gilbert had taken down a dragon alone. Thinking about it now, he was intrigued to know what this knight was capable of, considering she was as powerful as the Lancer. He praised the squire's talent, and this reminded her of her journey to get where she was. She discovered she had a mysterious power within her shortly after arriving at the orphanage. However, one day a friend was curious about the green magic emanating from her hand, so she decided to touch that floating energy. As a result, the girl's finger bled, and Inez was taken to the director because of it. Once there, a cleric calmed the situation by stating that the injured girl had already been healed. Then he asked to see Inez's power, and she showed that greenish energetic mass. Oaken, who also served the orphanage, believed that this magic was a gift from the heavens, and that the bearer should choose between two options: transform this energy into a blade to cut her enemies, or a shield capable of protecting those she loves. Regardless of the use, this type of sorcery could annihilate an entire city, according to the experienced mage. Faced with this dandog, the sovereign shield was responsible for training the prodigy girl, who from a very young age trained incessantly to hone her skills. Despite being born with a gift that could literally save the nation from its enemies, Inez couldn't avoid the fear of hurting someone again. With this trauma in her subconscious, the child didn't know how to deal with it and ended up distancing herself from others. After all these years of isolation, Inez Harness met Noor during that unexpected visit and knew she had heard that name somewhere before. One day during her training phase, the knight was so distracted that she was nearly killed by a giant praying mantis. Dandog was there to prevent a tragedy, but he seriously stated that the student could not afford such carelessness. For Inez, Dandog was not just a special instructor, but also a father figure. On that day, the Sovereign Shield was alerted by a subordinate that a new swarm of insects was approaching from the west. In chaotic times like these, Dandog confessed he would love it if Noor were still around. As time passed, Inez's unresolved feelings developed and hardened her heart as she began to feel envy toward the man her master so highly esteemed. Dandog admired this Noor enough to wish for his presence in a war, and the Sovereign Shield's pupil couldn't bear it. So when she met the young Noor, this feeling worsened, but she swore an oath to become the shield of the Clay Kingdom, and thus she couldn't be swayed by these personal issues. Her duty was to protect Lady Lindbergh, and that's what Inez tried to do without getting involved in unresolved personal matters. Reflecting during the journey, Noor observed the landscape carefully until he saw a path through the wheat field probably made by someone. When he realized what it was, Lin ordered Inez to stop the carriage, which she did. In the field, all the wheat touched by that dark presence rotted immediately. In the face of the spreading black smoke, Lin cast her magic to reveal the hidden being causing this devastation. Far away, the royal capital was bombarded and surrounded by monstrous beasts. Rain ordered the infantry to block the roads to prevent the invaders from entering while the civilians were evacuated. Additionally, the Secret Corps and the Hunters Corps had to act as quickly as possible to reinforce the resistance. The king imagined that Doritas, the leader of the magical empire, had come to fulfill his promise that the Clay Kingdom would eat its own words. The hope of avoiding the kingdom's end rested in the hands of the four sovereigns who were having trouble reaching the capital, as each was forced to fight powerful monsters that appeared in their paths. Among them, the Sovereign Shield led his men against king goblins that slaughtered the defensive lines. Similarly, Keru, the Sovereign of Shadows, along with Oaken and the others, resisted the surprise attack of enemy forces. At least Rain believed his sister was safe on her way to Mithra. However, guiding a powerful winged creature that infested the wheat field with its virulent magic, a young boy repeated endlessly that he needs to kill them all. When a magical shield around the two was broken, the beast struck the boy violently with its tail. Observing the situation, Inez deduced that this monster was the Black Death Dragon. Without thinking twice, Noor rushed with his sword to save the attacked boy. Before the dragon, the adventurer used Parry to keep his guard high and unyielding. Inez commented that the boy appeared along with the creature when Lin used her revelation spell, meaning the child was a demonfolk. Some time ago, Rain had explained to his sister the concept of demonfolk. They appeared to be human, but were semi-human with the ability to create a mental bond with monsters. According to records, 200 years ago, Mithril was practically wiped off the map by beings who controlled powerful beasts. After that, humanity began hunting demonfolk incessantly, and it was believed they had been exterminated. However, Rain believed the descendants of this race were still around. If true, the prince imagined these beings harbored hatred for humans for being hunted like rats. Regarding the Black Death Dragon, Inez knew this animal lived in swamps, so perhaps the boy was dragging the beast to the royal capital. Probably the shock caused by the revelation spell broke the mental bond with the demonfolk, causing the dragon to react violently. Even so, the squire felt anger toward Noor for attacking without hearing what she had to say, and she even prevented Lin from helping the instructor. On the front line, Noor had no trouble holding off the monster, and intended to keep it at bay until his two traveling companions arrived. However, the dragon expelled a substance that, if Noor moved aside, would hit the child behind him directly. Considering this, the man deflected the attack with the black blade, but part of the viscous liquid hit him, leaving him poisoned. Unable to react, Noor remembered that Inez wanted to say something before he charged at the enemy. Apparently, she wanted to warn that it was a poisonous frog. Lin tried to save the teacher, but Inez blocked her with her shield because because a poisonous mist could emerge in the field at any moment and kill the princess within seconds. The potency of the frog's venom was so great that even Sane, the sovereign healer, would have serious trouble curing it. That said, the dragon expelled the mist around the field. Lin tried to purify the surroundings with a spell, but nothing was enough. Suddenly, one of the dragon's fangs collided with the magical shield, and when the mist cleared, Anise saw Noor still battling the monster. She then remembered when Dandalg mentioned this adventurer's name, realizing that Noor embodied the true mentality of a squire by sacrificing his life to protect others, and was not a mere fool acting on his own. In any case, after an intense battle, the man fell to the ground already without strength to react. Some time ago, in a prison in another kingdom far away, children were kept as prisoners for being considered cursed because they possessed the power to control magical beasts since birth. When the guard throws food scraps into the cell, the children rush to eat what they can, like rats. In past decades, the first people infected with this curse used their powers only to control livestock and increase production in the fields. However, this gift soon began to be used for war and extermination, leading society to mark the demons negatively. Outside the cell, the guard watched the children eat like animals until he decided to enter and punish one of the boys for looking at him with that face he hated. This treatment was not new. It was part of the boy's daily routine. On this day, just for asking why he was being beaten, one boy received such a severe beating that he was almost unrecognizable, and to make matters worse, spent 3 days with only water to drink and nothing to eat. Due to this unwanted gift, this child began to read other people's minds, but no skill could free the boy from his degrading situation. In fact, upon discovering the boy's new talent, they treated him with even more violence. At night, he remembered all the times he was treated with contempt by society and couldn't shake off those intrusive thoughts, further traumatizing the child. Interestingly, he never reacted to this mistreatment or even thought of reacting, even though he hated being beaten almost daily. Deep down, he didn't want to hurt anyone or see more blood than he already saw in his daily routine. However, one day a man appeared wanting to use the demon folk's domination powers to help a certain nation in war. Knowing that the child had never known what it meant to be respected and valued, the man said it was the greatest honor to help society with his abilities while bringing monsters that needed to be tamed for battle. Eager to be useful, the boy was surprised to discover that he could finally help someone, something that was previously unthinkable. The man went further, promising that the boy would never be beaten again if he did as he was told, and would have access to delicious meals he had never had before. And this was not limited to this specific child, but also extended to all his friends in their dirty, rotten cells. It was soon revealed that this man was the same one who had beaten the boy so much in prison. Now, being more honest with his speech, he stated that if the boy refused the agreement, his situation would worsen even more in the cell. Using a magical device to prevent his mind from being read, the man felt confident that he could gain the demon's support for his selfish purposes. But even though he couldn't know what the man was actually thinking, the child knew one thing for sure: he never broke his promises, even if they involved the worst fate he could offer the demon folk through his brutal beatings. As it stands, we already know the outcome of this conversation. The confidence that the man would keep his promise made the boy resolve to kill his targets at any cost. However, the seal was broken by travelers who crossed his path, causing the demon folk to lose control of his magical beast and be attacked by it. This event put enormous pressure on the boy because he imagined that his friends would continue to suffer because of his failure in this mission. At the same time, seeing the creature approaching him gave him an inevitable feeling that his death was near, which he saw as a good thing since he considered himself useless and incapable of helping anyone. In fact, he was happy to die, hoping that in the next life he would not be as despised as in this one. Maybe he would even get a chance to eat something delicious. However, as he closed his eyes waiting for his end, the demon folk opened his eyelids again to check the sound of a sword in front of him. It was an unknown man using his Parry ability to confront the black dragon of death, and the demon folk didn't understand why someone was protecting him. Even when the dragon released its toxin into the air, the warrior made sure to extend his healing to the child, saving him from death by the spreading poison. But after an intense battle against such a powerful creature, the man finally lost his strength and fell to the ground exhausted. The poison was already taking over his body and making it difficult to breathe, but when he saw his grayish blood on his hands, Noor felt relieved for some reason. As a child in front of his parents' grave one day, he went to collect ingredients on the mountain after returning from training at his school in the royal capital. Returning home, he celebrated having filled his bucket with food, but it was no accident that he collected so much food. Lacking knowledge about vegetation and its properties, Noor used to bring home new ingredients that could be included in his diet, but that day he ended up ingesting a highly poisonous plant. So he crawled all night until he reached a water source to wet his head. Not knowing what to do, he sought answers on how to heal himself in the books at home until he found the plant he had ingested in one of them. Its name was Dragon's Ruin, and his mother always said he should never eat that plant. Even poisoned, the young man tried to keep up his training while practicing his light healing ability to avoid dying. Over time, he felt he was gradually improving since he no longer felt pain. When he returned beyond the mountain and once again encountered the Dragon's Ruin, he was now more cautious, but not enough to avoid being bitten by a snake called Poison Thorn. After punching the creature in the face, the child fainted again, but woke up shortly afterward without feeling unwell. To get revenge on the snake, he takes it home to fry, and the animal's venom was just a spiced oil entering his diet at this point. The next day, he caught another venomous thorn and let it bite his arm, noting that the venom was spreading more slowly than the day before. With this, Noor began to develop a special taste for poisonous things, imagining that tolerance to this substance would finally be the new ability he longed for in addition to his usual parry. Just like the day he went back to eating Dragon's Ruin to test his capacity, the boy remained steadfast in his goal. In the end, even though he didn't exactly gain a new ability, he could now eat poisonous things at the cost of vomiting very little blood. Maybe that's why Noor gets up after being intoxicated by the dragon with such a savory taste in his mouth. Before taking the monster's fatal blow, the human saves his life and blows part of the venom out of his nose like mucus. Behind him, the child seemed to be recovering with the healing he had left active on her, so Noor refocused on his opponent using Parry to stay in the fight. However, noticing that the man was starting to gain some advantage, the dragon began to inhale an absurd amount of air into its lungs, and Noor believed that the monster was going all out. To prevent the worst from happening, he used Parry before the winged frog could spit out whatever it had accumulated inside. As a result, the monster exploded like a balloon. In front of the dead monster, Noor wondered how such a dangerous animal could be roaming these parts, and got the answer from the child he had saved. She confessed that her mission was to take that creature to the city, and having no idea it was a demonfolk, Noor imagined that this child had brought the frog to eat just as he would have or had raised the beast as a pet. Therefore, the man apologized for killing the child's food or friend and promised to make amends, but the boy refused any form of payment and explained that he could control magical beasts. Surprised, Noor asked if anyone else had this ability, and the child became frightened upon hearing the word ability because his gift had always been seen as a curse wherever he went. Discovering that more people like this boy were born with this power, Noor interpreted it as a gift from the heavens, contrary to what the boy had heard about it until then. Also discovering that the child was a demonfolk, Noor knew there was a tribe of demonfolk where everyone could control creatures, which made him remember that he had often imagined what he would do if he had this ability. He would certainly have the land animals take up hoes and help in the fields, while the aerial ones would serve as carrier pigeons. Noting the man's tranquility, the demonfolk asked if Noor was not afraid of him or did not hate him, but Noor didn't understand these questions. After all, the boy's ability was extremely useful and should not be underestimated. Hearing this, the boy couldn't contain his emotion because feeling useful was really his weak point. Noor analyzed that this child was the opposite of him. Since he was a boy, Noor had fought incessantly to develop a single ability, while the demonfolk was born with such a powerful innate talent. Curiously, this hadn't made the child confident, quite the opposite, and Noor didn't understand why. Anyway, he patted the boy's head and assured him that his power was extremely useful. At that moment, Lin and Denise arrived to see how the man was. They suggested seeking treatment as soon as possible, but he assured them he would be fine despite being poisoned. Lin saw that the miasma exhaled by the frog was so terrible it killed the wheat it passed over, so she could hardly believe that Noor had not only survived ingesting this substance but had also returned to fight and defeated the Black Death death dragon. The only explanation she had was that one day she had heard from Sane, the sovereign of salvation, about the Holy Spirit. When the cleric molded his body and mind like a true saint, this technique began to purify everything it touched and healed all wounds. This is the perfection that Sane achieved after 40 years dedicated to his eccentric training, but Noor seemed to have reached this level at a young age. At this point, the warrior asked that the child be treated by Lin, and the girl noticed that the boy had pale skin with silver hair mixed with light blue along with deep and dark eyes. Putting the pieces together, she understood that the boy was a demonfolk, and knowing all the weight that came behind this certainty, she asked Noor what he intended to do with this child. He replied that he intended to take her with the group in the carriage, but Inez protested and Lin remained silent because she had studied the history of this demonfolk and read terrible things about them. Noor explained that he owed the boy for disrupting his work of taking the frog to the city, so the two women in the group panicked with this information. Speaking of which, Noor asked who had ordered the boy to do this, but even he didn't know for sure. Analyzing the child's gaze and race, Inez was certain he was a slave from another kingdom, as slavery was banned in Clay. When the boy revealed he had nowhere to go, Noor reiterated that he would at least like to take him to the nearest city, and Lin remembered her father had taught her to trust her own eyes instead of being swayed by rumors, and this embarrassed the noblewoman for so easily succumbing to the prejudices against demonfolk instead of verifying for herself that this child was truly innocent. Soon Noor asked the demonfolk's name, and he finally revealed it to be Rollo. Despite Lin and Noor's commotion, Inez reminded them that the carriage's destination was the sacred theocracy of Mithra, where the boy's race was forbidden. In other words, if they took Rollo in the carriage, they might become enemies of Mithra. Amidst this impasse, a mysterious, ominous-looking man approached the group, surprised that Rollo wasn't dead yet. That malicious being complains that the guy ruined the job he was supposed to do. Noor then discovers he was involved in the process and assumes he was responsible for messing everything up, apologizing for it. The bizarre man doesn't even understand why the boy is apologizing, because he couldn't care less about who messes up the jobs he needs to handle. In fact, now his business is only with Rollo, who is worth the effort of having under his control. Imagining that the guy isn't going to hand over the child, the mysterious man attacks from behind Noor at an incredible speed. However, the bearer of the black blade manages to defend himself with a parry just in time. Impatient, the enemy orders the child to be handed over, and Noor gets furious that the man doesn't even know her name. All that matters to him is the money a creature like her can fetch, or rather her carcass. The objective is to take Rollo and deliver her to the client. In this guy's mind, he's doing the demonfolk a favor, since this kind of race only lives to suffer and generally doesn't mind kicking the bucket. As he spoke, the mercenary attacked relentlessly until a parry from the black blade destroyed the opponent's weapon. Watching the fight closely, Lin can't even keep up with the brutal speed of the rivals, while Inez keeps the princess safe. Although he lost his main weapon, the mercenary pulls out two daggers to continue his offensive, even though Noor is known for having an almost impenetrable defense. As his attacks were frustrated, the mercenary grew increasingly impatient and intensified the ferocity of his blows, aiming for the enemy's head. The last stab was so powerful that even defending with his usual technique, this time Noor almost lost his balance and fell, while Rollo couldn't withstand the pressure of the wind caused and hit the ground. After being dragged several meters by the impact, Noor lost much of his breath and started seeing the adversary as a serious threat, aware that a stab like that could be the end of him. Just like the Minotaur he fought, this is an evident case of a hit kill. One of the man's daggers breaks, so he simply draws another and continues the offensive. All Noor can do is defend against the attacks because the opponent's tremendous speed doesn't allow any kind of reaction. Moreover, he needs to protect Rollo, and if he gets injured in any way, he might indirectly put the child at risk. The intensity is so sinister that Lin doesn't even consider getting close to try to help, knowing this is a matter for the big leagues. Meanwhile, her bodyguard fulfills her role as sworn, protecting the princess with a magical shield at a safe distance without getting involved involved in the mess. After all, she knows that mercenary is none other than Deadman Zadu, an S-rank adventurer. A while ago, in a military meeting, Inez arrived with a documentation of an unresolved case where the mission's target was to eliminate a man who was reportedly dead. However, the same document was still marked as in progress, as if it hadn't been resolved yet. Dandog, the Sovereign Shield, thinks the case should already be considered closed. Sig, the Sovereign Sword, mentions that it's about Deadman Zadu, whose name literally means dead man. After becoming S-rank at a young age, Zadu ended up becoming a target for others' ranks. Hearing this, Gilbert would be happy to take down a guy like that, but his instructor suggests that the Sovereign Lance stay out of it. Without backing down, Gilbert comments that this guy is scaring even the strongest in the kingdom. Mayan, the Sovereign Bow, says Zadu is too strong for anyone, and it wouldn't be wise to send more people to die to this guy. Karu, the Sovereign of Shadows, agrees with this view because nothing good will come from a clash against that guy. But since young Gilbert was curious, Oaken tells that Deadman mastered the ancient art of dwarven alchemy as a child, and at 13 he earned the nickname Dragon Slayer. Realizing this, the Lancer notes that he wasn't the greatest prodigy of his generation. The mage continues the story, saying Zadu gained fame throughout his journey until he was considered the pinnacle of what an adventurer can become. Inez questions at what point this individual became a target, and Sig explains that this guy doesn't always use his extraordinary abilities to rescue kittens stuck in trees. Inez reads one of the records where Deadman was responsible for wiping out 36 members of a merchant family. Sane, the Sovereign of Salvation, recalls that it was suggested by the Adventurers Guild that his license be revoked, but Karu points out that some useful deeds Zadu did for society end up dividing opinions about this. By the way, one day he neutralized a potential disaster with his own hands. According to Sane, because this matter is too complicated, it always ends up being shelved. Sig laments that in the mind of that S-rank, the only thing that matters is seeking money above all else. For Deadman, morals, customs, and civilization mean nothing. The best example of this is described in the document Inez holds. Once Zadu annihilated an entire country. With all this in mind, the Divine Shield protects Lady Lindbergh with utmost caution, while Noor struggles to keep his head attached to his body. On the day of the meeting, Sig recounted that Zadu killed the entire regional army along with its royal family. As the news spread worldwide, civilization came to understand that Deadman Zadu doesn't know the concept of good and evil. Keeping Lin in the rear, the vice captain of the warrior corps explains that this adventurer has already been challenged by half the world who sought the absurd bounty on his head. But this only resulted in a pile of bodies around Zadu, who saw the reward for his death multiply increasingly. To avoid more unnecessary deaths, Inez revealed that the Adventurers Guild publicly announced Deadman's death in an attempt to bury the case, which is why he earned the nickname Dead Man. Speaking of the devil, although Zadu was alive and well, his daggers couldn't say the same. As he drew his knives against his opponent, the giant sword with a peculiar shape managed to ruin his weapons. Noor apologized for breaking the entire S-rank collection, but reminded Zadu that he was the one who attacked first. Puzzled by the man's way of speaking, Zadu didn't accept the stranger's apology, especially since his mithril knife was destroyed in this duel, but his orichalcum and dragon fang daggers should resist literally everything. Noor worried that the guy might want compensation, so the S-rank noticed just how odd this guy was, but even stranger was the sword he wielded. Reacting to this, Zadu threw his crucifix-shaped weapon into the air, then the sword disassembled into dozens of similar blades, all pointing at Noor. According to Deadman, this technique was called Silver Cross. No matter how many swords Noor destroyed, the S-rank assured that he could make more. When the silver daggers were thrown at Noor, despite his rigorous training for moments like these, he knew he couldn't handle so many projectiles at once. Therefore, he was forced to use his own body to shield Rollo from being hit. First in his back, and then in his arm, the daggers pierced the adventurer, triggering Inez's alarm, because at this rate, the man wouldn't last long. Thus, the Divine Shield engaged in a mental struggle between helping Noor or staying within the shield to protect Lin closely until she turned to the princess and asked for permission to join the battle. She then interfered with the advantage of the Silver Cross, using her magical shield blocking every projectile launched at her and her allies. Having sworn to protect Lady Lindbergh, Inez knew that Noor's death could cost her life afterward, and consequently the princess's as well. Using her divine shield not just for protection, but also for offense, the officer prevented damage to her allies, but her offensive power wasn't enough to hit Zadu Deadman, who dodged the attacks with mastery. Thus, Ines asked Noor to take care of the offense while she focused on the group's protection. The man thought about what he could do to get through that swarm of swords and then saw the solution in the death black dragon's fangs. He enhanced his physique and asked the knight to open part of the shield, then threw the fangs toward the swords, destroying each one of them. With considerable ammunition left, Noor intended to maintain the strategy until he created an opening, but Zadu surprised him by attacking Ines from the flank. Noor managed to parry before the tragedy happened, breaking another blade of the opponent. This time the dagger was made of adamantium, so the S rank simply swallowed hard, accepting that this guy was capable of destroying all his equipment. After accepting this, he didn't intend to lose his entire collection in a single fight, so he announced he would flee, even giving up on going to that celebration happening in the royal capital. Ines asked what celebration it was, but he didn't know the details, only that it was going to be one of those extravagant parties. Having said that, he turned and bid farewell to the others ironically, but Noor responded genuinely, not realizing it was a mockery. Then Zadu commented that this guy was among all the strange people he had encountered in his life, the strangest of all. He then told Rollo he was lucky because he was going to make a lot of money off the demonfolk. Speaking of which, Zadu itched not to attack again, but couldn't resist and used a piece of adamantium for one last attempt. But he understood that Noor was a real wall in front of the child. Thus, Deadman disappeared in a dark smoke. After that, the group discussed the celebration the S rank mentioned, and Lynn confessed she was curious to know what it was. Therefore, they considered passing through the capital, which terrified Rollo because he heard that the most powerful creature of all was destined for that city, a monster capable of leaving the entire place in ruins. Hearing this, Lynn was convinced that their destination should be there, surprising her bodyguard by revealing she already knew Rain's plans because she knew well how her brother thought. Rain wanted Ines to take the princess to Mithra if any threat arose, but the capital would be caught off guard if the group didn't arrive quickly to warn about the attack. In the end, Ines agreed, but demanded that Lynn not leave her side for even a second. As for Rollo, he decided to accompany the travelers, admiring the leadership and care he received from Noor. On their way, Lynn reflected that she was afraid, but Noor's presence brought a sense of calm for everything the man had demonstrated up to that moment. Meanwhile, the adventurer showed wild horses to Rollo, proving that his skills were not just with the sword. And this man, almost straight out of a hero's tale, was the one the princess needed to take to the capital, even if it cost her life, because it would certainly cost the entire kingdoms if she failed. So she asked Ines to pick up the pace. In the meantime, Darkin informed Rain that the population had been evacuated and that the 6 sovereigns had been assigned to thwart the enemy's ambush. The secret corps continued their search for the opponents, but nothing was found. With the facts on the table, Rain deduced that the enemy hoped to exhaust and separate Clay's forces with this hide-and-seek game, while preparing their troops for a new wave of attacks which could come from anywhere north or south by land or by air. Speaking of aerial attacks, Darkin emphasized that the hunters hadn't spotted the winged beasts they were looking for, which increased Rain's tension even more. Speaking of which, the prince saw a strange magical mass forming in the sky, so he used a revelation spell that brought to light the worst imaginable enemy. Lord Darkin thought it was a black dragon, but Rain analyzed that it was much larger than that. In fact, it was a calamity dragon. When Noor was a child, he used to read stories about these terrifying creatures that roamed the world, known as diabolical dragons. At the same time, his father would tell him the legend of a dragon slayer, a man who decapitated one of these beasts and discovered that various parts of the monster, like claws, teeth, and scales, could be used to craft fantastic equipment and medicinal products capable of bringing prosperity to any land. Impressed by this story, Noor declared that he wanted to become a dragon slayer, but his father laughed and warned him that it wouldn't be an easy task, as these creatures were incredibly powerful. Some even lived for thousands of years because they had no equal adversaries. They could make the ground tremble with their steps and cause mountains to collapse with just a sweep of their tails. The threat was so great that long ago though the entire continent was nearly devastated by these wild dragons. Teasing the boy, his father shook Noor's head as he told him that monsters like these devoured people as an afternoon snack. Years later, on a carriage ride toward the capital, Noor felt something outside. When Rollo took a look, he spotted a calamity dragon. Soaring majestically above the city, the colossal creature terrified the entire population, who watched in disbelief at its indescribable size. Lord Rain wondered if the Empire realized the horror it had unleashed, while Darken remarked that according to records this dragon should have been in its sleep period since it had only been resting for 150 years. Rain deduced that the beast was awakened specifically to attack the city, so he ordered his subordinate to evacuate everyone before the worst could happen. On top of the city wall, Mayan followed the monster's flight alongside her archers, sensing someone using magic to seal off all evacuation routes, making it impossible for the 6 sovereigns to gather. Meanwhile, Sig was surrounded by skeletons and Dandalg had a pack of fierce wolves circling him. Gilbert urged the king to flee, but his majesty remained calm, instructing the captain to protect the population and ensure everyone's safety outside the capital. As for King Clays, he had his own task to accomplish. Analyzing the situation through his binoculars and knees, had no doubt that the capital would be entirely destroyed if this dragon wasn't stopped. Feeling a bad omen, Lady Lindbergh suspected that her father would use himself as a shield to save the population, even though she knew he was no match for an enemy of this caliber. Beside the princess, Noor didn't seem as tense as the others. In fact, he watched the winged beast as if on a safari, admiring the size of the creature since it was his first time seeing a dragon. Rollo quietly commented that the frog they encountered earlier was a dragon, but decided to keep that to himself, while Noor asked Lynn if her father and brother were still in the city. Sadly, she was sure they were, but it was too late to save them. However, Noor believed he could still make it in time. The girl looked at the distance between them and the walls and asked if she heard him right, but Noor didn't lose his conviction, reminding Lynn of what he did to that goblin. She recalled that she used the wind burst to propel him toward the giant, but this time the distance was much greater. Nonetheless, Noor intended to use his sword to absorb the impact of the fall. He felt indebted to the people of this city and to the king, so he would love to lend a hand. Besides, he thought solving this situation would be easy, and after everything she had experienced with this rank E adventurer, Lynn didn't doubt anything anymore. Soon she questioned why she was sitting there complaining when her sensei said there was still time to help. It was obvious that the wind burst wasn't designed to serve as a catapult, but the person requesting this intervention defied the usual logic, so there was no reason to hesitate. Meanwhile, Clays recalled the moment when Doritas claimed it would be easy to punish his insignificant kingdom with brute force. At that time, Clays assured him that he wouldn't hand over the dungeon of perdition to that man. Doritas argued that an outdated civilization like Clays would only waste the dungeon's true potential, while they could develop a military force capable of dominating the world with the resources found there. Clays responded that his kingdom chose not to wield a power beyond their control, but that was why Doritas believed his rival would always rule a small nation, never possessing the ambition and capacity to be a great king. Now the Calamity Dragon had just set foot on the capital's soil, leaving destruction in its wake. Clays now knew that Doritas would go to any lengths to seize that dungeon. He had underestimated his opponent and was now paying a high price for it. As he climbed to the top of a tower, he was thrown into an old memory where Lynn was playing with her father in that very spot. Even though the entire city was threatened with ruin, all that concerned the king was his daughter's safety, and this feeling pained him deeply. In fact, he agreed with Doritas that he was not the type of man meant to wear a crown. Being honest with himself, Clays had always felt more at ease on the battlefield, so he apologized to all those who had to follow the orders of a foolish leader, and though it wouldn't exorcise his sins, Clays was ready to die in exchange for one of the dragon's eyes. Far away, Anise invoked the divine shield and instructed Noor to stand in front of the formed cylinder. Once he was in position, Lynn cast a series of spells that could protect against the attack and others that would necessarily increase the power of the impulse, albeit at some risk. Because of this, she apologized in advance if the guy's backside caught fire in the process. Noor threatened to reconsider his decision, but the girl cast the wind burst, launching him far into the distance. At the same time, Clays finds himself face to face with the Calamity Dragon, which opens its massive mouth, gathering energy. Rain realizes that this is the ancient breath that incinerated the entire continent hundreds of years ago, leaving the entire population frozen in fear at the sight of this unstoppable power. Clays quickly understands that the enemy won't give him any chance for a fair fight, but at the very least he feels he must do something worthy of his crown before meeting his end. With this resolve, he unsheathes a small shining blade, a weapon that Sane explains is the explosive sword capable of draining all of the user's mana to deliver a single sacrificial strike. Without a hint of fear, the king raises his weapon, preparing for the final attack of his life. But just then, Noor arrives at the last moment, using his parry skill to turn the dragon's head to the side, preventing the breath from devastating the city and indirectly saving the king. The townsfolk watch the scene in disbelief as the dragon slowly falls to the ground. Once it rises again, the dragon, revealing a feminine voice, questions why it's surrounded by an endless smoke. In the midst of this, she sees Noor and deduces that this small human was responsible for the intervention. Her eyes burn with rage, for in her mind, the strong must control the weak and crush them with violence. With her tail, the dragon demolishes part of the wall and directs her aggression at the human, who parries the tail with the same skill as before. Once more, the creature crashes to the ground, and Noor admits that he thought he was going to die there. A few minutes earlier, when he was thrown by the wind gust, the young man had tripped over a stone and started spinning through the air like a windmill. He used physical enchantment to regain his balance. Standing before the massive wall, the adventurer leapt even higher, his body propelled closer and closer to the dragon. For a moment, he threatened to back down in the face of such a terrifying threat, but he shook his head to stay focused, and the rest is history. After knocking the beast down again, Noor scratches his head, surprised that the parry worked so well on such a large creature. This realization gives the man more confidence as he grips his sword tighter, no longer seeing the dragon as a terrifying beast, but rather believing he can defeat the enemy on his own. Meanwhile, Lin, Inez, and Rollo arrive at the royal capital on horseback, trying to find the king and escape the city as quickly as possible. However, the group is struck by debris, causing them to fall from their horses. The damage could have been much worse, but Inez saves them all with her magical shield. Ahead of them, those responsible for hurling the debris emerge from the shadows, emperor goblins marching toward the princess and the others. Lin reflects that these monsters are much smaller than the ones she fought with Noor in the forest. Still, they are powerful, so the girl tries to think like her master, searching for a solution to this conflict. She then asks Inez and Rollo not to be afraid, as they're merely facing goblins, which her squire agrees with, considering Noor's opponent. The monsters attack and Lin responds with the ice dance, but it has no effect. As the goblins reach the shield, Rollo decides to act, taking control of the monsters and stopping their movements. Lin takes advantage of this to invoke her Cossidus magic, while Inez summons her divine sword. With the goblins now completely frozen, the warrior strikes them down with her sword, shattering them into icy fragments. With the victory, Lin observes that not only does Inez deserve the title of divine shield, but her divine sword is also worthy of such honor. As for Rollo, the girl was amazed to see him control those enormous goblins with just a few words, and the fact that this young demonfolk is so powerful is mind-blowing. Either way, she imagines it must take great courage to use such a strong ability. Meanwhile, the dragon attacks the diminutive human in her path with increasing fury. Despite being a mere insect in comparison to this winged beast, Noor manages to dodge every blow with his parry skill, frustrating his opponent. Although she believes her claws and scales should be indestructible, she sees her body taking serious damage from the impact of that sword. Speaking of which, Noor also doesn't understand how this strange weapon can remain unscathed even when used against such tough opponents. Regardless, he knows that the black blade is the key to victory. However, defeating the dragon won't be easy, especially since she knows she's at a disadvantage on the ground. She takes to the skies and begins gathering her breath once more. When she's built up enough power, she unleashes it directly at the human who dared to challenge her, leaving Noor with no choice but to defend with a parry. He deflects the dragon's breath like a baseball, sending it straight into the atmosphere and causing a continental explosion in the sky. Faced with this, the dragon descends from the heavens and lets out an ear-piercing roar. Rollo observes the scene and comments that it's not just rage that's consuming the creature, but also her wounded pride at seeing her opponent not even taking the challenge seriously. Similarly, Clays reflects that dragons are naturally egocentric, but an ancient dragon of this level is even more so, considering they're known as the most powerful creatures on Earth. Thus, when Noor attacks the enemy, he tears out one of her fangs, causing her to crash down. The The red eye loses its vibrant color, calming the beast. Seeing the claw and the monster before him, Noor recalls the story his father told him as a child about the dragon slayer, but he doesn't feel he fits that kind of character. The rest of the team gathers around, concerned if the warrior is hurt, but he assures them he's perfectly fine. In fact, he mentions that everything suddenly makes sense, all thanks to Rollo. The boy, confused, asks what he's talking about, so Noor explains that the dragon calmed down just as the boy had said it would. However, Rollo reveals he had nothing to do with it, surprising the adventurer. After all, the monster stopped being hostile out of nowhere, and Noor had assumed the demonfolk had used his powers to tame the beast. For the last time, the child insists that he did nothing, which reminds the man of the time the boy expressed his reluctance to show his power, fearing he would be hated for it. Noor decides to drop the subject and instead asks if the demonfolk can send the dragon back to where it came from. But Inez intervenes, warning that a monster like that roaming free could be extremely dangerous. The adventurer understands that it would be easier to kill the dragon then and there, but if possible he would prefer not to. After a brief reflection, Lynn agrees to let the dragon live. She then turns to Rollo and asks if he's capable of sending the winged beast back. Considering the creature's power, the boy isn't sure, but he assumes the best he can do is politely ask it to return to its place of origin. To give the boy some confidence, Noor assures him that neither Inez nor Lynn are afraid of his power, which calms the boy's heart enough to muster the courage to do what needs to be done. Even though he hesitates, Rollo steps forward and begins his spell, but stops before it takes effect. Noor asks if something went wrong, but the truth is that the dragon informed the demonfolk that it would do whatever its master commanded. Noor breaks into a cold sweat, and Lynn can hardly believe this is actually happening. Regardless, Rollo seems unsure of what to do next, so Noor suggests he calmly ask the dragon to return home and never again threaten humanity. With that, Rollo closes his eyes and resumes his ability. Within seconds, the dragon raises its head, and the demonfolk informs them that the beast understood every word and would follow the order to the letter. The dragon then takes flight and departs. But as it crosses the skies and everything seems resolved, a bolt of lightning strikes the dragon at incredible speed, exploding upon impact and bringing the dragon down instantly. Observing the fall from a nearby cliff, Doritas lets out a laugh. With his binoculars, he focuses on the fallen monster and notes that even a dragon that has lived for thousands of years is nothing more than a pawn on his chessboard. After turning his gaze to the capital, he laments that the entire city didn't turn to dust, but it hardly matters to him because if he didn't succeed one way, he'll achieve it through the attack he's about to launch. With that, he orders a subordinate to begin the offensive, and the officer summons hundreds of soldiers around him, including some with firearms and extremely advanced siege weapons. Days before bringing his strategy to the battlefield, King Doritas needed to be sure it would indeed bring an end to the Clay's kingdom, as retreat was not an option. In the throne room, he was informed that a beast tamer had already sent the Calamity Dragon toward the enemy capital, and after the beast caused all the necessary destruction, Doritas's forces would march on the devastated city with the infantry fully equipped with magical swords and shields, while the elite troops would carry magical armor and cannons. Additionally, there would be 3 Aegis, which are mobile mana generators, and 4 weapons of mass destruction called Brionac, capable of unleashing ultra-powerful mana blasts. With this news, Doritas laughed, confident that victory was certain, until Randius approached his majesty and knelt to make a plea, as he saw no benefit to the nation in this war. In response, the king grew tired of the warrior's stance and kicked him in the face, asserting that no one would be a threat to the empire as long as he had all this technological machinery at his disposal, and this war would serve to show the entire world. Now, as he observes the effectiveness of his Brionac cannon, Doritas is certain that in the future this will be the story people tell about the Clay's kingdom, a nation of fools that didn't take the dungeon of perdition seriously, leading to the downfall of the entire nation due to their selfishness and lack of intelligence. Meanwhile, Doritas will be remembered as the human army that liberated the people of Clays from the hands of an incompetent king. According to Doritas's leader, there is no need for multiple versions of a story. All we need is one absolute truth. Meanwhile, Rollo guides Noor and the others to the site where the dragon fell, trying to get closer to check if it's still alive. At the same time, Lynn points to the cliff where the powerful army of Doritas, the Magic Empire, is stationed. Similarly, as the king orders his troops to advance, a soldier spots the Princess of Clays with her protector, the Divine Shield. He alerts his leader to this, and Doritas recognizes that Anise is one of the living legends roaming this world, and that she's likely one of the reasons the capital wasn't completely obliterated. In any case, he sees this as the perfect opportunity to end the era of legends and usher in the era of those who possess wisdom. Thus, he orders the Brionac to be fired at the identified enemies. As the cannon is positioned, he can hardly wait to see the Divine Shield evaporate as if she were nothing, because this will be yet another of those so-called legends to die by his hand, and it's for such glories that Doritas loves war. At the conclusion of his thought process, Brionac was properly aligned for firing, and that devastating amount of mana gathered at the cannon's tip until the order to fire left the king's lips. In that instant, the beam surged forward at an unstoppable speed, racing towards Anise and the others. Moments earlier, sensing the strange activity from the enemy's powerful weapon, Anise had ordered Lin to take Rollo and flee, and order the princess obeyed. As the beam shot towards her, Noor stepped in front and used Parry to deflect the mana with a thunderous impact. Doritas tried to make sense of what had happened, and one of the soldiers speculated that there had been a malfunction with Brionac's ignition, but the king, uninterested in excuses, immediately ordered another shot. On the other side of the battlefield, Noor wondered what kind of power they were up against, and about the movement of those soldiers spread across the territory. Lady Lindbergh explained that Doritas III had mobilized his forces, and that probably 10,000 enemy soldiers were ready for an offensive. The capital of Clays had its own army, but it wasn't enough to fight against such a powerful force. Fully aware of this, Anise informed her charge that they would retreat towards Lord Rain, the girl's brother. But before that, they needed to deal with the threat that sought to ensure the entire group perished on that soil. As multiple mana shots came their way, the Divine Shield activated her protective ability to defend her allies, and the vast array of magical barriers could be seen by Doritas from miles away. The offensive power of his cannons didn't seem to be having the desired effect, and this wiped the smile off his face. For safety, one of the soldiers suggested His Majesty should take cover in the rear, and Doritas reluctantly retreated but ordered the attack to continue. Noor suspected the attackers would keep them under siege until the end, but he was sure there was a way out of this ordeal. With that in mind, he announced to the group that he would divert the attention of the Magic Empire and buy them some time while the other three should use this chance to escape. Lin was worried about her instructor's life, but Noor was determined to follow through with his plan. Deep down, he reflected that while he might not be great in a fight, at least he was used to running away. A childhood memory surfaced. He used to hunt beehives and be chased by the bees, so everything should be fine if he ran like a madman, just as he did when he was a kid. Either way, he assured his comrades that he would return alive, so they shouldn't worry. Lin agreed after some hesitation, but before her mentor embarked on his suicide mission, she wanted to offer some help, so she extended her hands near Noor's body and remained silent. He wondered if it was some sort of defensive magic, until the princess told him to brace for impact. Confused, the man turned to understand what she meant, thinking that the girl might eliminate him before the plan even started. Meanwhile, another Brionac shot began to form. Terrified, Noor didn't feel ready, so he used a physical enchantment and simply took off running, but Lin launched a gust of wind at his back, propelling her instructor far away. Somehow escaping instant death, the adventurer passed through Anise's Divine Shield and encountered the multiple mana projectiles flying through the sky towards his allies. Using Parry, he managed to deflect a few dozen, and further ahead more shots were deflected. Seeing that it was working, he kept up the effort when he hit the ground again, and since the momentum was too powerful for him to stop, all he could do was keep going as far as he could. At a surreal speed, he approached the enemy soldiers and used Parry again, disarming each adversary without giving them a chance to react. The longer he held the front line, the more time Lin and the others would have to escape, so Noor kept the plan in motion for as long as he could. Witnessing the scene from atop the hill, Doritas saw swords and magical shields flying through the air and struggled to understand how anyone could pull off such a feat. Soon enough, he would see up close the man responsible for his confusion, because using the extreme strength in his legs, Noor leaped to the top of the precipice with an unbelievable jump and stood before the king of the the magic empire. Below, where the troops had watched their equipment soar into the sky, they now saw the swords falling with all the weight accumulated from the height, striking the soldiers one by one with their own weapons. But it wasn't just light equipment that the adventurer was capable of lifting with his brute strength, nor sent the mana-generating aegises soaring as if they were nothing. At the same time, he created tornadoes with the impact of his speed as he barreled through the enemy units, making Doritas himself one of the victims of his insane charge. After rising again, Doritas saw his entire army being battered by that man. This man who stopped before the king only because he was exhausted. Doritas recalled seeing this man on the other side of the map, so he couldn't understand how he had crossed all that distance in such a short time. Regardless, the man paid no attention to the soldiers around him and looked directly at Doritas, leading the king to believe he was the target. Terrified, the emperor tried to compose himself, thinking of the Kaiser armor and sword made of orichalcum that he possessed, so he unsheathed his weapon and took a defensive stance, but his hands wouldn't stop trembling. Noor ignored the man and lifted the 4 Brionnax from the battlefield, nearly dropping them on the king. Assessing all the losses he had suffered to this man, Doritas III wondered why he hadn't been killed yet. When he saw Noor's sword, the sight triggered a memory. One day, while passing in front of the throne of the kingdom he was now invading, Doritas had seen the black sword of King Clay's, the relic he had always wanted above all else, made of a heavy unknown material that no normal man could carry so much, so that King Clay's himself barely wielded the weapon with both hands. As the man before him handled the black sword with such ease, Doritas, wet himself in terror, ran to his horse and fled. A few seconds earlier, from the emperor's point of view, Noor was seeing the situation quite differently. As he observed the man's gleaming golden armor complete with a horse decked out in the finest gear, the adventurer wondered what this guy's deal was. Despite looking important, the guy was just staring at him with that strange expression. Whatever the case, Noor didn't have time for random reflections because the battle was heating up, and it was time to act. First and foremost, he couldn't let the soldiers recover their weapons, which were falling back to the ground, so he kept all the gear suspended in mid-air with his parry skill. On top of that, the army of the Magic Empire had come equipped with all this bizarre machinery. Even though he had no idea what these giant machines were, Noor figured it was probably not a good idea to let them operate at full capacity, so he added them to his list of objects to keep airborne. After causing complete chaos on the battlefield, the warrior couldn't shake the feeling that the old man intrigued him. Noor just wanted to know what that individual was doing there of all places. At that moment, Doritas made a comment as if he already knew Noor, which only confused the wielder of the black blade even more. As he approached the monarch, he didn't sense any kind of threat, so he redirected his efforts to the enemy's Brionnax, lifting them all into the air at once. Upon seeing the man return, Doritas questioned why the enemy hadn't killed him yet, and Noor didn't understand why the old man saw him as hostile. Noor figured the emperor was probably some Alzheimer's patient lost in the middle of the conflict. To ensure he wasn't seen as a threat any longer, the adventurer rested his sword on his shoulder and flashed a slight smile, but Doritas's immediate reaction was to run to his horse and flee as fast as he could. With that, Noor felt a terrible reaction in his body, causing him to lose strength. It seemed like he had hit his physical limit after the chaos he'd unleashed in the battle, and now his health was paying the price. As he spat blood onto the ground and saw enemy soldiers surrounding him, all Noor could hope for was that his allies had managed to escape successfully. However, a young female voice invoked her falling star ability on the battlefield, and Noor assumed it was Mayan the archer from the Sovereigns. At the same time, someone else conjured their Dragrave technique, and Noor knew exactly who wielded that power. Looking toward the figure, he had to guess the name 3 times before the spearman remembered he was Gilbert. To top it off, Gilbert's master Sig approached Noor to thank him for his great deeds, then announced he would take care of the rest of the work. With that said, the swordsman charged into the enemy army and unleashed his 1,000 Blades ability, mowing down an absurd number of opponents along the way. Watching the knight's movements, Noor remembered that this was the kind of man he had wanted to be when he was a child. Meanwhile, from the sidelines, Sane lamented the Sovereign's actions right after he had requested they avoid excessive bloodshed. On the other hand, Oaken thought it was a tough order to follow when facing an army of this size. Sane understood the mage's point of view, but emphasized that the dead couldn't reveal any useful enemy information. Changing the subject, he mentioned that the time had come, so Oaken summoned other sorcerers to use earthbond magic, which caused roots to spring up from the ground and immobilize neutralize the rival soldiers. At the same time, Dandalg arrived with his troops, creating a huge commotion in another part of the region, and the sight of the rising dust enchanted Oaken. No matter how old he got, the mage had always appreciated the beauty of a well-fought battle. He then joined the summoned sorcerers once more to cast Stone Prison, a spell that raised a rocky wall around the enemies. After that, it was time for the Sovereign of Salvation to take the field with his subordinates, aiming to heal the survivors. As Noor looked carefully at each of these individuals, he noticed they were all the instructors from his childhood training. He couldn't hide his joy at reuniting with them. From atop the stone barrier, Mayan and Karu spotted Noor. After the conflict ended, Lin returned to heal her instructor. She thought he should rest more, but the man felt as good as new, although hunger had suddenly hit him hard. Sig informed them that an enemy officer had cracked under Sane's interrogation and revealed that no more troops were coming for the time being. According to the informant, the Empire had thrown all its forces into this attack, including the dragon and beasts that reached the capital. Setting that aside, the swordsman pointed out that the Emperor had fled despite everything. Oaken expressed surprise that such a cowardly old man had even shown up on the battlefield, and the Sovereign Blade figured it was because the Emperor had grown too confident with the new resources he'd brought to the war. On that note, the mage remarked that it wasn't a smart decision for an old man who demanded to be called wise by the common folk, and that comment caught Noor's attention as he wondered if Oaken was referring to the old man lost on the front with his gold-covered horse. The mage explained that the armor was made of orichalcum, capable of withstanding an endless array of spells and abilities, but above all, he decreed that the Emperor's sense of style was as poor as his actions. Speaking of which, Sig mentioned that they could still catch Doritas if he had fled to the border, where there was a fortress with a bridge spanning the ravine. However, Oaken warned that there was no chance of capturing the monarch through conventional means, so it would be good if somehow they could fly. Picking up on that, Noor casually remarked that it might be possible if the creature was still alive. With that, he led the sovereigns to the Calamity Dragon, and Oaken was mesmerized by the sight of such a magnificent beast. It was the first time Sane had been tasked with healing such a gigantic creature, and the honor of the task filled him with pride. Using his extraordinary talents, the Sovereign of Salvation restored the dragon, and at the same time remarked that he hardly recognized Noor because he had grown so much. Oaken was startled to hear that name, since he had also been one of Noor's teachers back in the day. Noor remarks that the magic teacher is still going strong, and the playful man confidently claims that he'll live another 100 years if they let him. The young one chuckles and replies that the old man's jokes are still funny, though the wizard takes offense as he was being serious. Setting that aside, he asks the boy if they're really going to ride this wild creature, but Noor assures him everything will be fine because they have Rollo. Oaken wonders if the demonfolk is truly confident in his abilities, but the boy shakes his head, boldly unbothered by the doubt. Ready or not, the dragon slowly opens its eyes, regaining strength. Noor signals Rollo that it's time to get to work. Suddenly, the winged beast rises with force and roars deafeningly. According to Rollo, she seeks revenge and wants Noor to lead her towards settling the score. Since the dragon is so eager, Noor declares it's time to move out, but is puzzled when Lin and Inez step up to mount, as he had assumed only the sovereigns were going on this journey. Lin explains that the group needs Rollo to connect with the dragon, so she and her bodyguard will ensure the demonfolk's safety. Actually, they had thought Noor would be joining them. Hearing this, Noor starts sweating like a waterfall, terrified of heights, but since it was his idea in the first place, he doesn't think it's fair to back out now. Seizing the moment, Sane announces that he'll join the others to monitor the dragon's health and that of the travelers, plus he and Karu are skilled in diplomacy. The Shadow Sovereign asks to sit this one out, not wanting to intimidate anyone through sheer ignorance. Realizing who's speaking, Noor lights up, recognizing his former thief class teacher, and asks if he's really not going to tag along. Karu reconsiders and remembers they'll need his stealth technique to fly this massive thing unnoticed, and only he can provide that. As for Oaken, Sane asks if he'll need to keep an eye on the stone prison, and the wizard begrudgingly confirms. Arriving in the region on horseback, Lord Rain joins the group alongside the King of Clays himself, to Lin's delight, but to Inez's horror, who thought she'd be punished for not taking the princess to Mithra as planned. However, Lin's brother admits it was a foolish order to give. To be honest, he's happy to see the two of them there. Since he won't be joining the team in their mission, His Majesty leaves Rain in command and apologizes for always asking Noor for favors, but he'd like the adventurer to keep an eye on his two children. Naturally, Noor promises to serve the king however he can. With everything settled, Rollo orders the dragon to take off, and the group sets out on their mission. From the hilltop, Dandog wonders aloud if Sig should have said something to Noor after all this time, but the swordsman believes that above all, Noor never needed any of them to fulfill his role in life, and they would have been blind with arrogance to think they could have shaped that individual in any way. The Sovereign Shield agrees, seeing that boy as one of those heroes straight out of legendary tales. Sig takes the opportunity to admit that he felt ashamed of his own laziness when he saw Doridas's army soaring in the distance. He had thought he was in a position to teach others, but realized he needs to step back a few squares and reinvent his skills. Despite everything, the two sovereigns acknowledged their excitement over the spectacle the adventurer put on. As time passed, the unit assigned to locate Doridas continued their journey aboard the Calamity Dragon, still without success. Worried about the speed of Doridas's horse, Rain fears the Emperor may already have returned to his territory. Speaking of which, Karoo warns that the region beyond that steel bridge belongs to the enemy, so it would be wise to turn back. Suddenly, Lin notices movement ahead and calls her comrades' attention. Crossing the bridge is none other than Doridas racing on horseback toward the fortress. Karoo warns that they'll be turned to dust if they charge straight at the castle, which Rain agrees with as long as the enemy has time to activate their magical equipment to maximize their military power. On that note, Inez Harness asks permission from her superiors to annihilate the entire area, as this terrain will later serve as their escape route, so it's better to destroy the fortress's defenses while they have the chance. Hearing this, Lin reflects that her squire would never claim to have such power in an ordinary situation, and that statement made the princess realize that the war had truly begun. Surely Inez is furious after their capital was attacked, which she swore to protect, and now she wants revenge. Thus, Rain grants permission to the vice captain of the warrior corps, who summons her divine sword to lay waste to the fortresses in their path. Afterward, Rain warns his sister that the actions they take here will determine the course of the war, asking if she's ready to face the consequences of these acts. Without hesitation, Lady Lindbergh assures him she is. She then reflects that each figure present holds extraordinary power, and it makes her feel there's no need to fear any harm. Above all, she believes Noor is the trump card of the Kingdom of Clays. For some reason, she feels she has yet to uncover the true greatness of the power he holds. Running like a madman toward the safety of his castle, Doridas arrives just in time to avoid another beating from Noor. As he steps into one of the elevators of this absurdly high-tech facility, he berates himself for the humiliating shame he suffered at the hands of that unknown adventurer. When he reaches his destination, his subordinates ask for an explanation of what happened outside, but the Emperor's mind is too busy blaming his army, which can't win even with ultra-advanced machinery. Despite this, things were far from easing up for the ruler, because from the window of that floor, he could see the rapid approach of the colossal Calamity Dragon. Doridas had seen with his own eyes the Brionac cannon bringing this creature down, so the only explanation that comes to mind is that the dragon was resurrected, which is theoretically impossible. The problem is riding the beast is the Sovereign of Salvation, Sane, a diabolical genius in the healing arts. Moreover, the enemy wouldn't have simply launched the winged monster at them out of nowhere, meaning some demonfolk must be behind this. With this hypothesis in mind, Doridas interrogates his subordinates to find out where the Empire's beast tamer is. Suspecting it to be Master Lude, a man informs him that Lude left for Serenza to handle urgent business. Upon hearing this, Doridas assumes Lude is betraying the Empire, and so he grabs the subordinate and demands to know why he didn't stop the tamer. The man replies that it was the Emperor himself who ordered that Master Lude receive special treatment. Furious, Doridas throws the servant forcefully to the ground, prompting Randius to plead for him to take it easy. Doridas turns to the Imperial Sorcerer and orders him to come up with a plan to fix this mess instead of spouting nonsense. Holding back his anger, Randius complies and leaves. In the face of this extreme situation, the Emperor commands that the kingdom's most powerful weapon be activated, the Koronos. The servants try to warn him that this weapon is still in the testing phase and could cause widespread issues, but the monarch doesn't care. He wants to crush the looming threat at all costs. When one of the assistants continues to insist that the device shouldn't be used, Doridas kicks kicks the man and hurls him against the wall, claiming victory in round 2 with a perfect score. Next, if the lackeys feel they won't hit the target, the king orders them to implement mana tracking on the weapon's barrel. Without delay, Derrida's orders are followed, and the Kuranos is aimed at the target. The device was so powerful it drained the entire fortress's energy. According to Derrida's, this cannon is the greatest technological marvel of the Empire, developed under the wise leadership of Derrida's Roman III, a weapon of mass destruction nicknamed the Light of Judgment. At last, when the shot is fired, all that can be heard aside from the Kuranos ray is Noor shouting, "Parry." With that, the cannon's blast is deflected upward and explodes in the sky like fireworks, with the remnants falling directly onto the castle in a deadly rain. Horrified, Derrida's questions how this is possible, and a subordinate explains that since the mechanism was programmed to track mana, the mana furnaces of the fortress are now the target of the rain. Brazenly, Derrida's asks who the idiot was that ordered the cannon to be programmed this way, though it was him. Lacking the courage to accuse the emperor, the lead assistant throws in the towel, resigning without fear, fleeing before he can be killed. The rest of the crew follows suit, leaving the leader alone as the mana furnaces pull the rain toward themselves and explode one by one, causing Derrida's to buckle under the pressure, kneeling in despair. Meanwhile, aboard the Calamity Dragon, Karu loses the ability to track Derrida's location due to the thickness of the fortress walls. Rain assumes the coward has hidden inside some structure made of mana metal. Suddenly, another Kuranos shot is fired, even more powerful and faster than the previous one. With no time to react, the group watches Noor perform his parry once more. The maneuver works, but his jump causes him to fall from the dragon straight into the castle. Meanwhile, Randius arrives with a plan to fix the mess by killing Derrida's. The emperor screams for help, but at this point no one is willing to follow this idiot's orders. But before the officer can strike Derrida's seize, Noor burst into the throne room, quite unintentionally. Randius assumes this is some ace up the emperor's sleeve to avoid death, so a soldier fires at the adventurer. Noor dodges the projectile and slams Derrida's head into the floor to prevent him from dying for no reason. Then he asks why on earth he's being attacked, but the knights can only see the man as Derrida's bodyguard, so they resume their assault. Noor swats them away like flies, at which point the officer explains that the ruler has brought great ruin to the empire and its people and must be punished. Naively, Noor believes this can be resolved through a conversation, but the men are fed up with the nonsense, so one of them throws a bomb at the intruder. Noor kicks Derrida's and slams his head into the wall to save him from death, or so it seems. After that, Noor argues that an old man shouldn't be treated this way, prompting the warriors to complain that they're not the ones mistreating the emperor for no reason. Randius throws 3 more bombs at the ruler, but Noor saves him once again, urging everyone to let the old man die of natural causes instead of killing him here and now. Randius responds that there's no time to waste as the enemy is approaching with the Calamity Dragon, and killing the emperor is the only way to prove they don't want to fight. At that moment, Sane arrives in the room with his allies and assures them that there's no need for rash measures, especially since a dead man can't answer for his crimes. Rain asks Lin to tend to Noor's wounds, then greets the Circuit of 10, which is Randius' unit, as they had met in battle before. He then informs Emperor Derrida's that 23 people from the nation of clays are missing, 19 are buried under the rubble of their homes, 13 were burned alive, and 38 were injured by debris. These are just some examples of the havoc Derrida's caused with the Calamity Dragon in the royal capital. In total, there are 127 victims, not counting the people they haven't identified yet. Derrida's asks why Lord Rain is saying these things, and Rain replies that he's willing to forgive Derrida's if he's prepared to endure the same level of suffering as the people mentioned. After that, Rain wants to discuss the end of the war and the compensation to the Kingdom of Clays. With that said, Rain asks if anyone opposes this proposal, and Derrida's soldiers agree without hesitation. As for the Emperor himself, he wants to know what it means to suffer like the people of Clays. Sane tells the man to relax because the monarch is going to endure all of it and more, but Sane assures him that he'll be there to make sure the old man doesn't die in the process. Even if his leg is broken, Sane promises to heal Derrida's just enough so that he can participate in the discussion conditions about ending the conflict. Daru adds that even if Doritas can't handle the pain and loses consciousness, he'll bring him back, though the Emperor may scream and cry like a child. At this point, the man begins to wet himself in fear. Rain concludes by saying this is the price the Emperor must pay to understand the pain he's inflicted on others, then whispers in his ear asking if Doritas doesn't find the nation of clays merciful after all. Outside, Lin and Noor look over the devastation caused by the Coronos in Doritas' imperial capital. Noor blames himself for it, but the girl responds that it was all done to protect their allies. On top of that, only the mana furnaces were hit, no one died. Sure, it's going to affect the lives of the local citizens, but it's nothing compared to the damage done to the nation of clays. Rain arrives and explains that the nations involved in the war are coordinating to carry out repairs, and that Doritas has relinquished the throne in favor of his 10-year-old grandson, who is set to assume the crown soon. This means a guardian must be chosen for the boy, and the protectors will be the Circuit of 10 led by Randius. Randius approaches apologizing for the earlier misunderstanding and offering to do anything to make amends. True to form, Noor declines any reward, but asks that they rethink the bullying they'd been doing to the old man. Regarding that, Randius admits Noor played a crucial role in preventing Doritas' death, because if he had been executed, the Empire would have surely fallen into civil war. For this reason, the officer thanks him. On the other hand, Noor feels like he should be the one thanking them, because when he fell off the dragon's back, he was saved by the castle grounds, which ensured a landing that didn't kill him. Realizing how absurd that sounds, Randius bursts into laughter. This Noor is really something else. Either way, he assures Noor that he's gained a new ally for the future, and that the Circuit of 10 is ready to risk their lives to defend him. Noor finds this a bit dramatic and changes the subject, apologizing for having wrecked part of their city. Randius explains that no one was hurt and that the crimes committed by Doritas are far worse than what happened at the fortress. Even so, Noor offers to help with whatever is necessary, and the knight laughs once again at the stranger's kindness. In the midst of this, Rollo announces that the Calamity Dragon is tired of waiting and wants to head home, so the envoys from Clays board the beast and leave after properly bidding farewell to the Circuit of 10. While in the air, Noor asks Rollo to have the dragon fly lower, as Lin notices that her teacher is still troubled by the damage caused to this imperial city. She reflects that she should learn from her master's compassion. Upon arriving back from the journey, Rain informs the king that the war is over and that Noor deserves a reward. But as we already know by now, the young warrior isn't interested in receiving anything. Since the king insists, Noor looks at Rollo and has an idea. Since the boy was abandoned by merchants and has no place to live, Noor wants Rollo to have a normal life in the capital, just like any respectable citizen. Noor had thought about living with the boy, but he prefers to imagine the child safe with a wealthy family, rather than with a poor man who has nothing to offer. Besides, if it weren't for the demonfolk, this victory wouldn't have been possible, so the man wants Rollo to have the best of everything. With that, the king reflects on how out of all the things Noor could have asked for, he requests that a demonfolk be made a citizen of Clays when this race is seen by the sacred theocracy of Mithra as enemies. Boldly, Noor says he wants nothing else, and if the king insists on spending resources on something, it should be for the many people who lost their homes and families in the war. Everyone around is shocked by the warrior's audacity, while the king bursts into laughter, admitting that it's true. Meanwhile, Rollo reflects that he doesn't want to be beaten and mistreated like in his previous life and longs to truly be of use to someone, perhaps even enjoy tasty food once in a while. Suddenly, the boy wakes up in a huge bed and is greeted by his new caretaker with a grand feast. Rollo is surprised to be allowed to eat the food and is enchanted by the softness of the bread. As he takes a bite, he's overwhelmed by the taste. He had never experienced anything so delicious before, and he cries as he devours the rest of the meal. Upon returning to the royal capital, Noor is met with the chaos and destruction left behind by the war. He's deeply moved by the cries of people who lost their homes in the brutal attack of the Calamity Dragon. His immediate concern is whether Aunt Stella and the construction guys are okay, but seeing that the guild survived almost unscathed, he feels a brief sense of relief. As he takes a step, he accidentally kicks the guild's signpost, bringing back old memories. One day during his teenage years, Noor had returned to the guild after 3 months of training at every school in the city, yet he hadn't learned a single skill. Sadly, Noor couldn't register as an adventurer at that time. Thinking back now, the man finds it crazy that he had joined his former instructors in a war, especially since he hadn't seen any of them for 15 years. Speaking of which, if we go back those 15 years in the royal capital Clays, an eager Noor arrived at the academy ready to learn everything there was about the art of being a swordsman. Not quite understanding, Professor Sid questioned whether the kid had the Adventurers Guild's permission to start training, and so the boy showed him a document signed by the guild master. Without any enthusiasm, the Sovereign Sword warned that this process was going to be intense. As the first day of training went by, the rookie gave it his all. The group was seriously exhausted on the training field, and Noor was propping his wooden sword on the ground just to stay on his feet, even though his hands were bleeding from the intense exercise. Seeing this, Sid was sure the kid wouldn't last 3 days. On the 10th day, Sid acknowledged that the boy's determination wasn't something to be underestimated. During a training exercise where students were supposed to deflect a giant iron ball with an attack, the first candidate chickened out and collapsed on the ground before being hit. Sid called for the next one, and Noor raised his wooden sword, striking the sphere, but the pain was so intense that he dropped his sword. The professor shouted that a student should never drop their weapon, even if they broke a bone, because the enemy wouldn't wait for them to recover. So Noor endured the pain and picked up his sword with his left hand, leaving Sid surprised. Observing the boy, the professor found it hard to believe that those determined eyes remained, even after such a serious injury. It was at that moment he realized Noor had a promising future. A few days later, the rookie wanted to know from the instructor what kind of technique he should learn, so Sid took Noor to a place where he could demonstrate firsthand. Pushing his cape back, the Sovereign Sword caused a wind strong enough to make the leaves around them fly. Then, in a movement too fast for the naked eye, the master sliced every leaf in the air clean in half. Noor was instantly thrilled, eager to learn how to do the same, while Sid reflected that even he still had trouble executing such a complex move. So there was no way a child like this would even be able to see what had been done. However, Noor was already mimicking the exact movements Sid had used while demonstrating the technique, convincing the instructor that with proper training this boy could one day surpass him. 2 months after training started, Noor was already deflecting the iron ball with mastery using his signature parry technique, although Sid worried that he couldn't seem to learn anything else. By the 3rd month, Noor was still trying to master a new skill, but Sid realized continuing would be a waste of time, so he called his student over to tell him just that. Internally, he reflected that parry alone wasn't enough to make someone a swordsman and suggested that Noor find another path at a different training school. After being kicked out of Sid's school, Noor went to seek out Dandalg, the Sovereign Shield. Surrounded by hulking men, the short and stocky instructor wanted to know if the rookie knew what he was getting into. Noor explained that he was told to seek out a school other than the swordsman's. Dandalg sized up the scrawny kid, guessing he'd probably be blown away by a strong enough wind, but the boy was determined to join the training regardless. Eventually, Dandalg asked if the boy understood that a warrior's role was to become a shield for his allies, and Noor confirmed. Not really knowing what to make of him, the instructor carried on with the training. 2 months later, from the top of a cliff, students were pushing boulders down and others were supposed to block the stones with their arms at the bottom. Thinking the rookie would have quit long ago, Dandalg gave him credit for sticking it out so far. At that moment, part of the cliff collapsed. All the students quickly darted away, but Noor kept his fists crossed, ready to block the falling rock. Dandalg intervened, shattering the boulder before it reached the boy, but recognized that Noor could become an unbreakable shield if he received the right training. However, just a month later, much like Sid, the Sovereign Shield realized that the boy wasn't progressing and informed him of the situation. Noor wanted to continue, but the tutor explained that the student hadn't achieved the necessary improvement to keep going in the classes, and if he insisted on staying in training, he could easily die in the process. Internally, the professor regretted it, knowing the boy had potential. Not one to give up, Noor sought out Mayan to become an archer. Not too thrilled with a teenager, the instructor told him to throw a rock at a stick from a distance. Mayan was just waiting for him to miss so she could dismiss him, but Noor hit the target as easily as tossing a crumpled paper into a nearby trash can. Still unconvinced, the tutor had him repeat the process, and once again the boy did it without effort. Given that the woman had no more excuses to stop the kid, so she let him train, though she kept him throwing rocks instead of giving him a bow bow and arrow. Somehow she knew the boy had potential, but since he kept insisting on getting a bow, she felt cornered and finally gave him one. Mayan then instructed him to pull the string to teach him the shooting stance, but the moment he grabbed the weapon with more force, he wrecked it. This was exactly what the woman had feared. She even tried giving him other bows, but he broke each one just as easily. When she ran out of options, she handed him her own bow, convinced he wouldn't be able to destroy it, but the worst happened, so she ordered him to stick to throwing rocks. 2 months later, she asked Noor where he'd learned to throw stones like that, and he explained it was how he'd always hunted thunderflashes, the giant birds. Not believing a word of it, she figured there was no reason for Noor to stay in archery. So just like at the other academies, Noor was expelled by the 3rd month. The next school he went to was the Thieves' Academy, and to his surprise, Karu accepted him right away. The first task was to sneak up behind the enemy without making a sound and steal a feather from the target. The instructor noticed the new recruit had talent, but just as Noor was about to grab the feather, he got smacked in the head with a fan for making a noise. Next, they had to cross a corridor full of traps to reach a treasure chest. The idea was to avoid the traps, but Noor triggered every single one, racing through them like they were obstacles. Karu could see the kid had skills, but he wasn't following the rules of the exercise. 3 months later, the Sovereign of Shadows delivered the bad news we all saw coming, although inwardly he recognized the novice's remarkable talent. Faced with this, Noor turned to the Magic Academy, but after 2 months he couldn't even light his finger with a tiny flame. Seeing that the poor kid had no mana flowing through his body, Oaken asked him to enter the mana resonance chamber, but warned him to leave immediately if he felt any intense sensations in his body, as the room was capable of stimulating human senses to deadly levels. Days later, the professor noticed the student was still inside and rushed in, fearing Noor had died. But there he was floating calmly so much so that he asked the mage to leave because he felt he was about to sense the mana flow. 3 months later, Noor had only learned to imitate a lighter with his index finger, but Oaken was impressed to see him perform a dual incantation, something that had taken Oaken 50 years to achieve. Even so, this wouldn't help the boy become an adventurer, and he nearly lost hope. The next stop was the church, but Sane warned him that only those who had undergone the blessing ritual as children could train there. Noor decided he wouldn't leave until the professor accepted him as a student, and so he stayed, spending the night outside in the freezing cold. However, the Sovereign of Salvation had no pity and ignored the boy. Days and nights passed, and still the kid didn't budge from the academy door, until one day he was so weakened he nearly died from the cold and hunger. This time Sane was there to heal him and allow him to learn the basics of restoration. 3 more months passed, and Noor managed to perform a light heal, though Sane emphasized it wasn't enough to make Noor a registered adventurer. Heartbroken, the boy left the academy, and before he departed for good, Sane told him it was impressive that Noor had learned healing magic despite never having undergone the blessing ritual. With that, the boy left, and the healer believed the former student's progress had been nothing short of a miracle. Upon returning to the church, Sane learned Noor had disappeared, so he summoned the other sovereigns for a meeting. Mayan believed the boy was strong enough to fend for himself, but Sane argued they should nurture Noor's gifts so that he might become something extraordinary in the future. One by one, the other members of the council agreed, and thus they united to search for the missing boy. Fast forward to the present, Noor returned the guild badge to the master, who informed him that the head of the construction guild was looking for the young man to help build temporary houses, then handed him a map for guidance. As night fell, the adventurer was doing his part with his trusty sword, and his companions were overjoyed to have a brute helping with the heavy lifting. Gazing at the moon, Noor reflected on what a wild day it had been. He'd embarked on a journey, met Rollo, been used as a catapult projectile by Lin, defeated dragons and powerful enemies, but what stuck with him most was flying with the princess's magic. In the midst of it all, Noor's stomach growled, but he decided to work a little longer. Meanwhile, the king informed his son that the holy theocracy of Mithra had been conspiring with Doritas in this war. From the Minotaur incident to the Empire's magical equipment, the mana stones used in these cases could only have been produced within imperial territory. As a result, Rain figured that the times of peace had not yet arrived. Even so, the king stressed that there were people who needed them, and most importantly, They now had Noor on the side of the kingdom of clays. While handing out food to the workers, Lin spotted the sensei and thanked him for yesterday with a piece of bread before returning to her work. Left alone, Noor reflected that he had no idea where he'd be without the help of all these people. Raising his sword, he praised it with enthusiasm. With the black blade in hand, he felt he could finally be an adventurer, and maybe, just maybe, become a hero like in the stories his father used to read to him. Then a co-worker told him the area was clear enough, so he asked Noor to clean another part. Suddenly, a tower almost collapsed on the guy, but Noor protected him with his usual skill parry.